Chapter 9:15. However, she didn't force Lu Yanqing to stay. She only asked her to stay by calling her a sister. This was because she didn't want to detain Lu Yanqing to threaten Yu Qianqiu in the future. She understood that it would be difficult for a person like Yu Qianqiu to use threats to have any effect. She only hoped that Lu Yanqing's plea would be of some use at the critical moment. If she forced Lu Yanqing to stay, then the hatred between her and Yu Qianqiu would only deepen. On the contrary, the gains would not make up for the losses. However, to Mu Tianjiao's surprise, it didn't take much effort to keep Lu Yanqing. Lu Yanqing agreed after thinking for a while. He can actually escape from Songyan Xian's hands. Wu Xiong looked at the great bright wheel that disappeared into the night sky, and still couldn't believe it. He knew in his heart that in terms of cultivation, he and the great bright wheel were not necessarily stronger than Songyan Xian. For Yu Qianqiu to be able to escape from Songyan Xian's hands, it could only mean that this person was indeed not simple. It's late at night, Miss Lu should go and rest, Wu Xiong suddenly said to Lu Yanqing. Lu Yanqing bowed slightly to the couple and then left. After Lu Yanqing left, Wu Xiong tilted his head and ordered, "Bring me the gift from Yu Qianqiu." The two guards immediately received the order and left. Not long after, they came back with a square brocade box that wasn't too big. The words "Yu Qianqiu of the World Chamber of Commerce congratulates" were pasted on it. Wu Xiong took it and opened it. He couldn't help but be stunned. There was a pair of palm-sized golden men inside. It wasn't anything valuable. His subordinate took the empty gift box, and Wu Xiong took out the pair of golden men to examine. He discovered that it was the sculpture of him and Mu Tianjiao tying the knot. The carvings were lifelike and lifelike. It was obvious that some thought had been put into it. The 4 words "Forever and Earth" were engraved on the base. Although it was a very simple gift, it showed the sincerity of the sender. Wu Xiong silently glanced at Mu Bing, who was busy counting the congratulatory gifts, and sighed regretfully in his heart. If it weren't for you, why would I have to drive away a sincere congratulatory guest? Little did they know that Yu Qianqiu had no choice but to give away this thing, because he realized that the valuable immortal herb he had prepared in advance was simply not presentable, and he did not have the time to prepare another one. So he could only use the gold Jew to show his sincerity. Yu Qianqiu is Madam's friend. Madam, take a look. Handing the sculpture over to Mu Tianjiao, Wu Xiong sighed. I'm afraid that my actions today have hurt your friend. Mu Tianjiao held the sculpture in silence, her gaze lingering on the 4 words "Forever and Earth" for a long time. No one knew what she was thinking. It's late. Wu Xiong looked at Mu Tianjiao with a sly smile. Madam, the most important part of the wedding hasn't been completed yet. Mu Tianjiao was startled for a moment, then immediately understood what he meant. Her face instantly became flushed, and she was so embarrassed that she could barely lift her head. Wu Xiong laughed heartily as he grabbed her hand and pulled her away. The door to the bedroom in the inner residence was tightly shut, and the room was brightly lit, illuminating the newly decorated bridal chamber. Under the illumination of the candles, a beautiful couple sat on the edge of the bed, their arms crossed, and drank a cup of cross-cup wine. Wu Xiong took the empty wine cup from Mu Tianjiao's hand, and with a wave of one hand, the 2 wine cups landed firmly on the table in the room. At this moment, Mu Tianjiao's face was flushed, and her head was slightly lowered. Under the candlelight, she looked especially charming. Wu Xiong couldn't help but feel a little dazed. His throat moved, and he swallowed his saliva. Out of all the people in the world, I was moved the first time I saw you, madam. I have never felt this way since I embarked on the path of cultivation. Madam, don't you think this is fate? Mu Tianjiao softly said, and with infinite shyness, and let Wu Xiong hold her hand as he stood up. Wu Xiong lowered his head to her ear, and inhaled the faint fragrance of her body. He softly said, On the night of our wedding, madam, are you ready? Although he asked this, his hand directly reached for the belt at her waist, regardless of whether she agreed or not. Mu Tianjiao couldn't help but tremble. She only felt the belt loosen, and her clothes were already undone. She couldn't help but nervously close her eyes. Although he couldn't see anything with his eyes, he could feel that his clothes were being undone piece by piece from the outside to the inside, gently sliding to the ground. Very quickly, A slight chill invaded his skin, and a pair of strong palms directly touched his slightly trembling body. Her body was petite and exquisite, but it didn't lose its ample curves. Her skin was smooth and lustrous under the candlelight. Mu Tianjiao's alluring naked body stood unreservedly in front of Wu Xiong. Wu Xiong found it difficult to move his gaze, and he swallowed with difficulty. He could feel Mu Tianjiao's rapidly rising and falling full breasts, and he could feel her accelerated heartbeat. He immediately and efficiently took off his clothes and hugged Mu Tianjiao by the waist. As soon as Mu Tianjiao came into contact with the other party's similarly naked skin and smelled a rich masculine scent, she couldn't help but let out a moan. She didn't dare to open her eyes at all. The naked man and woman quickly rolled onto the bed, and a brocade quilt covered their restless and entangled bodies. Wu Xiong, who was half on top of Mu Tianjiao, looked at the beauty whose eyes were tightly shut, and said with a smile, "From today onwards, you are truly my wife. Why are you still shy when you see me? Madam, open your eyes and look at me." Feeling the restless object in her lower body, Mu Tianjiao's eyes trembled open, and she looked at the man in front of her, who was pressing on top of her. However, the moment she opened her eyes, she saw the naughty smile on the man's face in front of her. Following that, a heavy pressure came from her lower body, and that restless thing directly penetrated her. Mu Tianjiao immediately let out a cry of pain, and in an instant, the brocade quilt flipped, and the room was filled with the stirring of passion. It was late in the morning, but no one dared to disturb the newlyweds in the room. On the brocade bed in the room, the man and woman embraced each other naked. After a night of overflowing passion, Mu Tianjiao, who had just received the pleasure of the rain and dew, almost had no strength left in her body. The flush on her face had yet to fade, and she lay softly in Wu Xiong's arms. "Madam, do you regret following Wu Xiong?" Wu Xiong suddenly looked at the woman in his arms and asked. Mu Tianjiao lay on his chest and shook her head, saying, "Mu Tianjiao is not a fickle person. In this life, I will only follow one man and make a choice once. Since I've followed him, I will never regret it." As she spoke, she raised her head to look at Wu Xiong and said, "Unless my lord doesn't want me anymore, I won't ask to live together, but I will ask to die together." Wu Xiong immediately covered her mouth and said with a satisfied smile, "What do you mean live or die? How can you say such things on such a joyous occasion? Moreover, in the immortal world, besides the immortal emperor, who dares to decide our life and death?" Mu Tianjiao subconsciously looked at the golden sculpture that Yu Qianqiu gave her on the dressing table, and a trace of uneasiness flashed through her subconscious. She bit her red lips and said, "My lord, my father's conduct is not satisfactory, and I hope my lord will forgive him in the future. Of course, we are all one family now, so how can we be different?" Wu Xiong gently patted her smooth back and said, "Get up and change your clothes. We are newlyweds, and I will take you to the immortal palace to pay our respects to the immortal emperor." The two immediately got up to wash up and change their clothes. Mu Tianjiao had just tasted the forbidden fruit, so her body was somewhat uncomfortable, and her movements were a bit slow. When Wu Xiong saw this, he glanced at the red spots on the bed and couldn't help but laugh happily. Mu Tianjiao, who was sitting in front of the dressing table, was startled. She didn't know what he was laughing about, but she saw Wu Xiong stride over and gently take away the eyebrow pencil in her hand. He pressed down on her shoulder to prevent her from getting up, and patiently helped Mu Tianjiao draw her eyebrows. Mu Tianjiao was pleasantly surprised, and she acted like a spoiled child to cover up. "My lord's technique is so skilled. It seems like you are an expert. Who knows how many times you have done this?" Wu Xiong laughed and said, "This is my first time doing this, and I didn't expect to receive madam's praise on my first try." Then, he pointed the eyebrow pencil at the golden sculpture on the dressing table and said, "To be able to cooperate so well, it seems like we are really a match made in heaven. Then in this life, let me draw your eyebrows. I will draw it for eternity." Mu Tianjiao's gaze suddenly stopped at the base of the golden sculpture. The four words eternity suddenly made her feel a little irritated. It was clearly a blessing, but it felt like mockery. She felt a little uneasy in her heart, but she couldn't explain why. She couldn't help asking herself, could it be because this thing was a gift from Yu Qianqiu? And she had once confessed her love to Yu Qianqiu, so she felt uneasy in front of Wu Xiong? In the illusory immortal city, the news of Yu Qianqiu being humiliated and expelled at Wu Xiong's wedding banquet, and then being hunted down by Ash Cloud Xian to his death, had already spread like wildfire. This news was naturally spread by the representatives of the various sects who went to Wu Xiong's wedding banquet. Although they only saw the mess on the ground and didn't see Yu Qianqiu's corpse, in their understanding, it was impossible for Yu Qianqiu to escape Ash Cloud Xian's pursuit. Of course he was dead. Yu Nantian, who had accepted Yu Qianqiu's instructions and wandered around the illusory immortal city from day to night, was shocked when he heard this news. He immediately rushed back to the World Chamber of Commerce to discuss it with Hu Changshou. The two of them knew that this was a serious matter, and the news couldn't be spread before it was confirmed. Otherwise, it would cause the hearts of the people in the World Chamber of Commerce to fall apart. Thus, they went upstairs together to ask for confirmation. However, this news had already spread like wildfire, so how could it be hidden? Many people in the illusory immortal city heard the news and came to the World Chamber of Commerce to inquire about this matter. They were more or less taking pleasure in other people's misfortune. This was terrible. The lords of the various countries were all alarmed. They left a portion of people to guard downstairs, and the majority of them gathered upstairs, after Wei Chuanxiu, who was guarding by Suzhen's door, heard Yu Nantian and Hu Changshou's narration. He immediately snorted disdainfully and said, "This is utter nonsense. I can't wait for him to die. But your sect master's life is very cheap. He even wandered around in front of me early in the morning, and was chased away by me. It would be strange if he could die." Yu Nantian and Hu Changshou looked at each other, and felt that Wei Chuanxiu was comforting them. At the same time, the lords of the various countries also ran up in a bustling manner. When they saw the three people at the door, they immediately made a big fuss and hurriedly reported the news they heard. Chapter 916. At this time, the door to Wei Chuanxiu's room at the end of the corridor suddenly opened, and a sleepy Yu Qianqiu walked out. Standing at the door, he knocked on it twice, immediately attracting everyone's attention. They saw Yu Qianqiu pointing at a group of people and cursing. "What is it? Why are you shouting and making a ruckus here? Are you all tired of living and want to rebel? Get out of here if you don't want to die." In the eyes of these people, Yu Qianqiu's authority was unquestionable. The authority of the torture envoy had long been ingrained in their bones. The most terrifying thing was that apart from this torture envoy, there was also the old torture envoy who was even more powerful than the immortal Emperor Jin Tai in their hearts. That old torture envoy was someone who dared to go to the underworld to fight the Emperor of the underworld. No one doubted that the old torture envoy would come out to fight Jin Tai one day. Who knew if the current torture envoy and the old torture envoy were still in contact? However, seeing that the current torture envoy, Yu Qianqiu, dared to come to the celestial realm to cause trouble, it was obvious that he was very confident. Although Bai Changchun had left them for many years, the shadow left in their hearts was hard to erase. Especially the legend of him fighting the Emperor of the underworld. It was even more terrifying. They were both proud and afraid. When Yu Qianqiu showed up and yelled at them, the rumor was shattered. Who dared to stay and look for trouble? The group of people immediately lost their temper and shut their mouths obediently. They all ran away with their tails between their legs, afraid that they would be beaten up if they were too slow. The entire 22nd floor became quiet again. What happened? Who died? Yu Qianqiu swayed his sleeves as he walked over. Wei Chuanxiu looked him up and down and asked suspiciously, "Everyone is saying that you were humiliated at Wu Xiong's wedding and then killed by Grey Cloud Xian. What is going on?" Yu Qianqiu was startled when he heard that. Then he sneered and gritted his teeth. "It's not just a humiliation, it's a great humiliation. It would have been fine if it was anyone else, but it just had to be. You ingrate surnamed Mu. Don't think that I won't dare to do anything to you just because you have Wu Xiong's support. Wash your butts and wait for this daddy to kill your entire family and exterminate your entire sect." Ingrate bastard. Wei Chuanxiu had seen him angry before. But this was the first time she had seen this kind of anger that came from the depths of his bones. She paused and asked, "In that case, it's true that Sungyeon Exine wanted to kill you. Not bad. You can escape from him." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes at him and sneered. "He wants to kill me? If I wasn't at the edge of the paradise of bliss, I would have roasted him with my purple fire." Shoo! Wei Chuanqiu suddenly raised his hand to signal him to be quiet. He tilted his head to look at the staircase leading down from the rooftop and said, "Someone has arrived at the rooftop. It seems like he is negotiating with Yin Peng." In order to let Bai Suzhen cultivate in peace, he was on high alert at all times. Yu Qianqiu followed along and looked over, but didn't find anything. After waiting for a while, he suddenly saw a stream of light flash from the staircase and appear in front of the two of them. It was the Great Bright Wheel. When the Great Bright Wheel saw Yu Qianqiu, he was very surprised and asked, "Why are you back so soon?" According to his calculations, with Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, it would take at least a day for him to return. Due to the inconvenience of his identity, he wanted to inform Wei Chuanqiu and Yin Peng to go out and greet him on the way, in case something happened to Yu Qianqiu. He didn't expect that he had already returned. However, Yu Qianqiu looked behind him and asked, "She didn't come back with you?" Naturally, he was asking about Lu Yanqing. "She's still at Wu Xiong's manor." Before the Great Bright Wheel could finish, Yu Qianqiu's face had already turned ferocious. He said sternly, "Wu Xiong detained my people? She was the one who didn't want to return." The Great Bright Wheel handed the Jade Archive that Lu Yanqing asked him to hand over to Yu Qianqiu. He then tilted his head to look at the tightly shut door behind Wei Chuanqiu and asked with a frown, "Is Bai Suzhen inside?" It's not convenient to disturb her cultivation inside." Wei Chuanqiu chuckled guiltily. The Great Bright Wheel gave him a meaningful look. It was obvious that he was suspicious, but he didn't say anything more. He turned into a stream of light and disappeared from the staircase. After reading the contents of the Jade Archive, Yu Qianqiu casually crushed it into powder. He shook his head helplessly and said, "What kind of bullsh** tea is this? She's an intelligent person, but too bad she doesn't have a brain. Damn it, she's always doing things that she thinks she's a burden." The contents of the Jade Archive were very simple. The gist of it was that Lu Yanqing felt that she was useless, and that there was no point for her to stay at the World Chamber of Commerce. When Lanfeng's departure made her feel very guilty, it also made her realize that a useless person like her should leave the World Chamber of Commerce. Hence, she decided to accept Mu Tianjiao's invitation to stay there and not return. She didn't want to be a burden to the World Chamber of Commerce anymore. Although it wasn't explicitly stated between the lines, the meaning was clear. She would rather die than divulge the secrets of the World Chamber of Commerce. Perhaps it was because the Jade Archive was handed over by someone else that she didn't explicitly state it. In this regard, Yu Qianqiu was speechless. If someone really wanted to pry any secrets out of her, he would have 100 ways to easily make her speak the truth. Because this woman was kind to the point of being pedantic. To put it bluntly, she was stupid. She didn't have a brain, only a face. However, since she was willing to stay, it was likely that no one would force her to say anything in the short term. However, it was hard to say if she stayed in the cunning fox's den for too long. What made Yu Qianqiu the most speechless was that he had already vaguely guessed Mu Tianjiao's intention in detaining Lu Yanqing. Perhaps when he made his move against the Mu family, this woman would instigate Lu Yanqing to plead for mercy. If this wasn't pulling him back, then what was? How could he vent the hatred in his heart if he didn't wash away the humiliation that the family of three had inflicted on him with blood? "I can tolerate anything but betrayal. It's too late to redeem myself now." Yu Qianqiu paced back and forth in deep thought. No matter what, he felt that it wouldn't be a good thing for him and the World Chamber of Commerce if that stupid woman Lu Yanqing fell into someone else's hands. Sooner or later, something would happen. His footsteps paused, and he casually came up with an idea. He felt that he needed to find an opportunity for Wei Chuanqiu to ask the Great Bright Wheel to make another trip and bring that stupid woman, Lu Yanqing, back. The idea was simple. He was also prepared to have the Great Bright Wheel bring a Jade Archive to Lu Yanqing. This was called giving her a taste of her own medicine. He didn't need to be too clever to trick that stupid woman back. He just needed to write a paragraph in the Jade Archive, saying that when Lanfeng had returned from the outside with serious injuries and was on the verge of death, he wanted to see her one last time and wasn't afraid that she wouldn't return. Once she returned, he would immediately send her back to the human realm for no reason. He would let her be merciful in the human realm and continue to be that merciful and compassionate Guanyin Bodhisattva. Wei Chuanxiu saw the sinister smile on his face as he fell into deep thought. He couldn't help but ask, "Brat, what kind of rotten idea are you coming up with to harm people again?" Yu Qianqiu came back to his senses. He waved his hand and said, "Nonsense. Am I that kind of person? Forget it, I won't talk about it anymore. I need to go out and expose myself. I need to stop those unfavorable rumors from spreading." With that said, he flicked his sleeves and left, leaving Wei Chuanxiu standing there with a look of disdain on his face. Inside Wan Gutong's branch, the moment Wan Lihong exited the paradise of bliss, she had spent a long time investigating the ruins left behind by Grey Cloud Xian before coming here. In the rear hall, Wan Lihong told Wan Ling and Wan Gai in detail how Yu Qianqiu was humiliated at Wu Xiong's wedding banquet, as well as how Grey Cloud Xian tried to kill him afterwards. Wang Yi sighed and said, "This matter has already spread like wildfire. It looks like this Yu Qianqiu has already fallen into Grey Cloud Xian's hands. I find it strange. Isn't this Yu Qianqiu a member of the Immortal Palace? Why would the Immortal Palace let him die at Grey Cloud Xian's hands?" Wan Ling and Wan Lihong looked at each other. Wan Ling asked suspiciously, "You're saying that Yu Qianqiu is a member of the Immortal Palace?" Wang Gui rolled his eyes. "I'm not an idiot, don't try to hide it from me. The sect master has personally asked about it several times. On top of the series of events that have happened, if I still can't guess his background, then there's no need for me to stay here." Wan Lihong smiled bitterly. "It's enough for you to know this, don't spread it." Wan Ling also smiled awkwardly, indicating that she didn't mean to hide it. Then, she asked suspiciously, "Fifth uncle, in that case, you didn't see Yu Qianqiu being killed by Grey Cloud Xian with your own eyes?" "Yes. I also feel that with Yu Qianqiu's background, not to mention that it was near the paradise of bliss, no matter how high Grey Cloud Xian's cultivation was, he couldn't have killed Yu Qianqiu." Wan Lihong looked solemnly at Wan Ling. "Linger, if Grey Cloud Xian really killed Yu Qianqiu, the Immortal Emperor will be furious, and the division of power in the immortal world will change again. We Wan Gutong must prepare for a rainy day and seize the initiative. I'm here to ask you to personally go to the World Commerce Hall and wait. See if Yu Qianqiu really died in Grey Cloud Xian's hands." "Fifth uncle, I understand your meaning, I'll go now." Wan Ling understood and immediately left. When Wan Ling arrived at the World Commerce Hall, she saw Yu Qianqiu standing outside the building, pointing at a group of people and cursing. "Who's the one who started this rumor, cursing me to die? Just that old bastard Grey Cloud Xian wants to kill me? All of you scram." The group of onlookers really did scram, but it was obvious that they were sent by the sects to gather information, so they left to report. Even though the sects didn't know as much as Wan Ling, gathering information was the least they could do. In the blink of an eye, the area in front of the World Commerce Hall became much quieter. Wan Ling was speechless when she saw Long Xiaojiu standing beside Yu Qianqiu, smiling like a flower, as if she really liked Yu Qianqiu. Seeing this scene, Wan Ling suddenly felt a nerve in her brain inexplicably throbbing. She felt as if her nerves had suddenly gone haywire. She couldn't help but recall that day in the bathroom downstairs of the World Chamber of Commerce, when she was forced to flee in tears by Long Xiaojiu. Wan Ling's face instantly lit up with a bright smile, and she dashed down, blocking the path of a man and a woman who were about to enter the building. Seeing that it was Wan Ling, Yu Qianqiu was about to greet her with a smile, but Wan Ling leaned over and called out sweetly, "Big brother Yu, it's great to see that you're fine. Do you know how worried I was when I heard the rumor that something happened to you?" Her voice was coy, almost causing goosebumps to rise all over Yu Qianqiu's body. Chapter 917. Brother Yu? Yu Qianqiu was somewhat baffled. He couldn't help but touch his own face. He didn't seem to be so handsome that everyone would like him. Shameless slut. Long Xiaojiu snorted in disdain. Who are you scolding, Miss Long? Wan Ling's eyes flashed fiercely. Long Xiaojiu snorted and didn't reply. If she pointed out names, it would undoubtedly give the other party a reason to flip out. In any case, everyone knew who she was scolding. It was fine as long as she could piss them off. Yu Qianqiu had already heard about these two, especially Wan Ling's abnormal story. He immediately woke up from his narcissism and realized that he had become the object of these two women's competition. He immediately said to them bluntly, "You two are here to scout for information. Now that you see that I'm not dead, why aren't you going back to report?" The two women's expressions were a bit awkward after being exposed by him. However, Wan Ling's skin was clearly thicker. She rolled her eyes and replied, "Brother Yu, others might not know you. But do you think I don't? How could Songyan Exine hurt you in the pure paradise immortal realm? I'm here to ask Brother Yu. The once-in-a-century ranking conference is about to begin. I wonder if Brother Yu's World Commerce Association is going to participate? Who's your brother? You're so many times older than me." Although Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart, he still believed Wan Ling's words. After all, she had always thought that he was the immortal emperor's trusted secret agent. As for this once-in-a-century ranking conference, he had stayed in the illusionary immortal city for a long time. It could be said that he had heard about it for a long time. The ranking conference was actually a challenge competition. The rules were very simple. Every sect had 10 chances to challenge and be challenged. Under normal circumstances, the lower-ranked sects would challenge the higher-ranked sections. Every challenge would be won by 3 out of 5 wins. The winner of the challenge would naturally push the loser down from their original ranking. The loser would also have a chance to regain their ranking. However, the chances were the same. Everyone only had 10 chances. If the 10 chances were used up, then your sect's ranking would be fixed. If you wanted to compete again, you would have to wait for 100 years. In the end, the top 100 sects and the top 100 chambers of commerce would be chosen. In fact, after countless years of evolution, the majority of the chambers of commerce and sects had become family-like. This was something that could not be helped, regardless of which sect's leaders were more or less selfish. It was only natural for them to take care of their descendants. The years of immortal cultivation were endless. Gradually, the number of descendants increased. It was not strange for a sect or a chamber of commerce to become a family. As for those brothers and subordinates who had fought together with him in the past, they would slowly be ostracized. Although it was cruel, it was very realistic. Even if some disciples with other surnames joined in, they would all be putting their lives on the line. It would be very difficult for them to hold power. To put it bluntly, the ranking conference would determine the top 200 sections. The top 200 sects had to participate in the next ranking assembly and accept challenges. There was no reason to refuse. The rules were set by the Immortal Palace. Who would dare to refuse? Of course, the various sects of the immortal dimension were risking their lives to participate in the ranking conference, naturally for the sake of benefits. One should know that the various sects had to support so many disciples. The consumption of spirit stones was very large. This was because spirit stones could be used as currency in the immortal dimension. They were also necessary consumables for the cultivation of the various sections. The more people a sect had, the more spirit stones they needed to support it. However, after countless years, the spirit stone reserves in the immortal dimension were almost depleted. The spirit stone reserves in the 72 worlds of the human world were not enough for the various sections. Now, the largest source of spirit stones in the immortal dimension was the underworld. Therefore, all the sects wanted to squeeze into the underworld to make a fortune. However, the Immortal Palace guarded and controlled the passage to the underworld. It was not that the Immortal Palace did not allow people to make a fortune in the underworld. If they wanted to enter, they could as long as they had a pass issued by the Immortal Palace. The only way to obtain a pass was to participate in the ranking assembly. Every assembly would issue 500 passes. The top 200 sects would be divided according to their ranking. One pass could bring 100 people into the underworld. Some sects that had been in the top 200 for a long time had accumulated a large number of people in the pass. The more people that entered the underworld, the more spirit stones they would earn. The large sects would easily send thousands of people into the underworld. The profits they earned could be imagined. This was the main reason why the sects fought over the rankings. However, entering the underworld was not smooth sailing. The underworld was chaotic and vast. It was not something the immortal dimension could compare to. Warlords were divided, and the emperor of the underworld reigned supreme. In short, the risk factor was very high. The pass in the hands of the various sects would often be lost. Therefore, they needed to participate in the ranking assembly to replenish it. Most importantly, when walking in the underworld, they would often encounter the patrolling dark underworld army. Without the protection of a pass, they would be killed by the dark underworld army as trespassers. There were also some sects that were unable to survive and had no choice but to sell their pass. For example, Mu Tianjiao's Four Links Chamber of Commerce had obtained one because of this. As for whether or not to participate in the ranking assembly, Yu Qianqiu thought for a long time. He wanted a pass, but with the strength of the World Chamber of Commerce, it was almost impossible to enter the top 200. Even if he participated, it would be a waste. At the same time, there were a few things that made him suspicious. The fight between the various sects' disciples in the Divine Ruin Realm, the challenge of the Life and Death Mound's sect master, and this ranking assembly, as well as the various dangers that were rumored to be encountered after entering the underworld. He had experienced two of these four things. In both cases, the disciples of various sects were bathed in blood and killing each other. He always felt that the Immortal Palace was thinking of ways to purposely deplete the strength of the various sects in the immortal dimension. Especially the matter of the Life and Death Mound's Sect Master Challenge. Killing was forbidden in the illusionary immortal city, so why was it only permissible for sect masters to kill each other? Think about it, if the leader of a sect died, then the sect was very likely to be in turmoil. It might even collapse or be swallowed by other forces. This was something that Yu Qianqiu had unintentionally thought of after experiencing the Life and Death Mound's challenge. He vaguely smelled a conspiracy. However, the Immortal Palace was too ruthless. How could a sect survive without spirit stones? Especially those large sects that had more people to support. There were restrictions in the immortal dimension. If one wanted to earn large amounts of spirit stones, they could only go to the underworld. However, to go to the underworld, they had to obtain a passage token. Even Yu Qianqiu had no other way. If they wanted to go to the underworld, they had to first obtain a passage token. Otherwise, even if they found a way to sneak into the underworld, they wouldn't be able to pass through the dark underworld army. Therefore, they still had to think of a way to obtain a passage token. Ranking assembly? Yu Qianqiu looked at Wan Ling and said with a bitter smile, "With our world commerce's current strength, do you think there's any meaning in participating in the ranking assembly? Even if we go, we won't be able to squeeze into the top 200. Wan Ling chuckled and said, "Doesn't Big Brother you have two experts under him? If White Cloud Mountain Chieftain and Green Wingbat King were to make a move, we might have a chance." Yu Qianqiu shook his head. Nothing could happen to these two experts at the moment. The world commerce still had to rely on them to scare people. Especially Wei Chuanqiu. They still had to rely on him to impart the Myriad Demon Heart Sutra to Bai Suzhen. Nothing could happen to him. As for the passage token, it wasn't necessary to participate in the ranking assembly to obtain it. Stealing, robbing were all good methods. Of course, it would be even better if someone was willing to sell it. It naturally wouldn't do if the price was too high. We'll talk about this when the time comes. I still have some matters to attend to, so I won't be accompanying the two of you. Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands towards the two girls and entered the World Commerce's building in a flash. Meanwhile, Wan Ling and Long Xiaojiu looked at each other in disdain, snorted provocatively, and went their separate ways. On the first floor of the World Commerce, Yu Qianqiu walked around the various counters that sold immortal herbs. He discovered that there weren't many immortal herbs left, and business was very quiet. Most of the country lords had returned to their rooms to meditate and cultivate. Only a small portion of people remained at their posts, seemingly taking turns to be on duty. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu had come to inspect, someone couldn't help but grumble to him. Sect Master, take out some good stuff to sell. If this goes on, there won't be any customers coming. You guys sell what you want. Whether they want to buy it or not, just take your time to sell it. Yu Qianqiu left everyone speechless, then went upstairs. At this time, in the illusionary immortal city, the rumors about Yu Qianqiu being killed by Greycloud Xian were quickly purged. Instead, it was inconceivable that Greycloud Xian actually failed to kill Yu Qianqiu. Everyone found this a little hard to believe. Returning to the 22nd floor, Yu Qianqiu quickly took out a jade archive and inserted something into it. Then he walked to the door of his room. Wei Chuanqiu was sitting cross-legged at the door. Yu Qianqiu crouched in front of him and handed him the jade archive. Bat Kingwei, I'll have to trouble you with something. Based on your relationship with the Great Bright Wheel, can you ask the Great Bright Wheel to make another trip to Wu Xiong in the Paradise Immortal Realm and help me pass this jade archive to Lu Yanqing? Then bring her back? Wei Chuanqiu slowly opened his eyes and sneered. Who do you think the Great Bright Wheel is, running errands for you when he has nothing better to do? Leave it here. If he goes to the Paradise Immortal Realm, I'll have him deliver it for you. He took the jade archive and put it away. Yu Qianqiu thanked him, then peeked through the crack in the door and said, I won't disturb you anymore. Just as he was about to leave, he heard Wei Chuanqiu say, Don't go yet. You have something to do first. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. What is it? At first, I was worried that you wouldn't be able to solve this problem. However, seeing that you were able to safely escape from Greycloud Xian's hands, I've gained some confidence in you. Wei Chuanqiu glanced at him and said indifferently, Didn't you say that I would only be responsible for teaching her the cultivation method, and that you would solve any problems? He had indeed said this before. Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously, What problems do you need me to solve? Why don't you tell me about it first? To cultivate the Myriad Demonic Heart Sutra, the first thing you need to do is to communicate with your own inner core. In other words, you need to understand your own inner core and become connected with it. She's almost done with this step. It won't be long before she enters the next step of cultivation. Wei Chuanqiu slowly stood up and said with a solemn expression, I want you to collect 10,000 inner cores to help her refine her own inner core. Collect 10,000 inner cores? Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and asked in confusion. What do you mean? How do I collect them? Kill Yao cultivators or ferocious beasts and seize their inner cores. Use their inner cores to help Bai Suzhen refine her own inner core. Wei Chuanqiu said, enunciating each word. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He was tongue-tied for a while before he gulped and said, You're not joking, are you? Doesn't that mean I'll have to kill over 10,000 Yao cultivators and ferocious beasts? Where am I supposed to find so many fellows? Wei Chuanqiu's face was solemn like never before. He gritted his teeth and said, I know it's cruel. I don't want to do it either. After all, we're all demons. But with success comes sacrifice. If the demon clan has another ancestor of all demons, who would dare to easily enslave the demon clan and use them as mounts as they wish? Sacrificing a portion of the demons can save the dignity of the majority. It's worth it. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He didn't expect this fellow to have such great ambitions. He actually wanted to benefit all demons. It seemed like he couldn't use him as a mount anymore. Wei Chuanqiu paused and continued. Of course, you don't really have to kill over 10,000 Yao cultivators and ferocious beasts. But the more inner cores there are, the better it will be for her to refine her inner core. Why is it called the Myriad Demonic Heart Sutra? Because a demon's inner core is equivalent to a demon's heart. It contains the meaning that only by comprehending the heart of 10,000 demons can one cultivate the true sutra. If one doesn't understand 10,000 demons, how can one be worthy of being the ancestor of all demons? So the more inner core she has, the better it will be for her future cultivation. If it's really difficult to obtain 10,000 inner cores, you have to get at least 5,000. Otherwise, her future cultivation will be very difficult. Yao cultivators, ferocious beasts also have inner cores. Then Wei Chuanqiu waved his hand and said, although ferocious beasts are chaotic and reckless, Most of them are from the desolate era. Compared to normal birds and beasts, they all have unique talents. As long as a ferocious beast is born, it will start to nurture its inner core. When it reaches adulthood, its inner core will also be formed. Unlike other birds and beasts, they need to cultivate painstakingly before they can condense their inner core. Once a ferocious beast develops its spiritual intelligence and becomes an immortal beast, its inner core will fuse with its main body. Heaven's creation has its differences. There are gains and losses. It's really magical. And the reason why I have an inner core is because I've spent many years to gradually find a way to separate the inner core that has fused with my main body. When my inner core is completely condensed, I can start cultivating the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra. When are you going to return my inner core to me? Yu Qianqiu was listening intently and nodded repeatedly. He didn't expect him to suddenly change the topic. He coughed and said perfunctorily, "What's the hurry? I'll naturally return it to you when the time comes." Where am I going to kill so many Yao cultivators and ferocious beasts? The celestial realm is mostly immortal beasts. If I have to find them one by one, how long will it take? The place with the most Yao cultivators is naturally the human world. The place with the most ferocious beasts is naturally the divine ruin realm. Wei Chuanxiu frowned and said, "It's best to get more inner cores from both ferocious beasts and Yao cultivators. The more complex the better. That way, it will be more beneficial to her future cultivation." Chapter 918. Human World. Yu Qianqiu hesitated and frowned. As the torturer of the realm of monsters and ghosts, he commanded countless monster cultivators and ghost cultivators. It was not difficult for him to obtain 10,000 monster cores. But those demon cultivators and ghost cultivators were all prepared for the Fey and Ghost Immortal Exterminating Array. Especially after coming to the immortal realm, he could see and understand more clearly. If the spiritualization smoke was said to be the first barrier that prevented the immortal dimension from interfering with the mortal dimension, then the demonic spirit exterminating formation was the final trump card to prevent the immortal dimension and netherworld from interfering with the mortal dimension, and it was also the only trump card. It couldn't be used rashly, and once it was used, it would be a peerless trump card. Even if the immortal emperor and emperor of the netherworld were to fall into this formation, they would probably only have a slim chance of survival. Generations of torture enforcers had been stationed in the realm of monsters and ghosts to prepare for the activation of the formation of monsters and ghosts. Although it was inferred that the demon cultivators and ghost cultivators in the demon region would become sacrifices sooner or later, they were all subordinates of his commander after all. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he really didn't want to kill them. To put it bluntly, Yu Qianqiu could not bear to do it. Although he was cruel and merciless, that was only in situations that had nothing to do with him. If he wanted to be as merciless as Bai Changchun, he still needed time to temper himself. Seeing that he was speechless when he said the word human world, Wei Chuanxiu thought he was worried that he couldn't go to the human world to slay demons, so she immediately said, "In fact, the more inner Dan, the better it is." In other words, the higher the cultivation of the demon cultivator, the better it is, and the older the ferocious beast, the better it is. The best place to meet these conditions was actually the demon world. That was the true world of the demons, and there were countless old monsters there. However, the demon world had been sealed for many years, and there was no way to enter. Similarly, you have no way of entering the divine ruin realm. Most of the demon immortals who had ascended to the immortal world were under the command of the immortal palace. There were also those demon immortals who had the ability to establish themselves in the immortal world. They were not people you could afford to offend. As for the rest of the weaker ones, most of them have submitted to various forces in order to survive. You still can't afford to offend them. Come to think of it, you can only go to the human world to find a way. Yu Qianqiu felt helpless in his heart. He sighed inwardly. Could it be that he had no choice but to use his subordinates from the demon region? However, he replied perfunctorily, "Without the permission of the immortal palace, it's not easy to go to the human world. You worry too much. You don't have to go to the human world yourself. It's human nature to pursue profit. In the immortal world, as long as you have money, there's no problem you can't solve. Wei Chuanxiu took out a handful of divine-grade spirit stones, playing with them as he harumphed coldly. There are 72 worlds in the human world, other than the world where the immortal netherworld and Myriad Swords Devil Monarch fought. The other 71 worlds are frequently visited by the Immortal Palace's emissaries. You understand what to do now, right? Yu Qianqiu's eyes suddenly lit up. If he could avoid hurting his innocent subordinates in the demon ghost realm, he should spend some money. He rubbed his hands and asked, "You mean, you want me to bribe the emissaries of the Immortal Palace with spirit stones, and ask them to help me collect Monster Dawn in the 71 worlds of the human world?" He was good at this, and he had practiced it in his previous life. Wei Chuanxiu immediately rolled her eyes. Is there a need to be so sneaky? The more sneaky you are, the easier it is to arouse suspicion. Why don't you just spend money to buy the Monster Dawn? At that time, the emissaries of the immortal world will naturally come to the human world, and the cultivators in the human world will think of a solution. They don't need to do anything. They can just buy the Monster Dawn at a low price and sell them at a high price in the immortal world. One must know that a divine great spirit stone in the immortal world is worth a fortune in the human world. They won't need to spend much. Yu Qianqiu was aware of this point. A divine great spirit stone was equivalent to 100 million spirit stones in the human world. It was indeed a fortune. Since there was a way to get the Monster Dawn, it was easy to handle. Moreover, it didn't seem like it would cost a lot of money. He waved his hand and said, "I understand, leave this matter to me." "Oh right, when do you want the Monster Dawn? Give me a time frame so I know what to do." Wei Chuanxiu glanced at the closed door behind her, pondered for a moment, then said, "Half a year later." About half a year later, she will enter the cultivation period to comprehend the heart of a myriad demon. The length of this period depends on her luck, and there is no turning back. There is only one chance. To put it bluntly, it depends on her talent in cultivating the heart of a myriad demon. The longer she takes to comprehend the heart of a myriad demon, the higher her talent, and the higher her achievements in the future. Conversely, her achievements will be limited, and it all depends on whether she has the heart of wisdom. Hence, the higher the quality of the Monster Dawn, the better, and the more complex it is, the better. If the time limit is limited, she can learn from the strong points of the heart of a myriad demon, and not waste this opportunity. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu's expression instantly turned solemn, nodding his head. "I understand, I'll get it done now." Looking at Yu Qianqiu's disappearing figure, Wei Chuanxiu sighed helplessly. He understood in his heart that once the news of purchasing Monster Dawn was released, it would be the beginning of a disaster for Yao cultivators in the human world. In reality, it was just as he expected. After the news of the purchase spread, the high-level Yao cultivators in the human world's 71 worlds met with great misfortune. They were hunted down by cultivators from all walks of life, and as a result, a blood feud was formed between humans and Yao that could no longer be reconciled. What surprised him was that the cultivators in the human world fought with each other over the huge profits. Often, a high-level Monster Dawn could incite endless massacres, and the price paid was even higher than that of the Yao cultivators. The only place that was spared was the world controlled by Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu originally wanted to look for Jing Yuankong and leave the matter of purchasing the Monster Dawn to him. But when he reached the first floor, he hesitated. After some thought, he decisively went downstairs, passed through the main hall, and went straight to the Wan Gutong branch after exiting the World Commerce Chamber. This time, the door wasn't shut in his face like the last time. After Wan Gai received the report, he personally came out to welcome him. Yu Qianqiu followed him to the back hall, where Wan Lihong and Wan Ling were waiting. Wan Lihong immediately laughed when he saw him. "I didn't think we'd meet again so soon. Sect Master Yu's courage at the wedding is truly admirable. Don't mention the matter of this you being humiliated again." Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists towards them and said bluntly, "One doesn't come to a temple without a cause, so this you won't beat around the bush. This time, I'm here to ask for a favor from your esteemed sect. The three of them looked at each other, and Wan Lihong forced a smile. Why don't you tell us? He was worried that Yu Qianqiu would ask for money again. I want to purchase a large amount of beast cores from demonic beasts and wild beasts. I'd like to ask Wan Gutong to help me. Yu Qianqiu noticed the strange expressions on their faces and quickly added, Don't worry, I'll pay you in advance. Of course, I won't let you guys work in vain. I'll also provide compensation. Purchase a large amount of beast cores. Other than refining pills, there aren't many uses for these things. Wan Lihong asked after a moment of doubt. Since Sect Master Yu is willing to pay, then the World Commerce Chamber should be able to settle it themselves. Why do you need me, Wan Gutong, to help you? It's simple. Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept over the group, his voice solemn. You all know a little about my matters. This is my mission. But I don't want others to know that this matter has something to do with our World Commerce Chamber. After all, I've offended some people before, and I'm afraid that some people will try to ruin my plans. I'm sure you all understand, right? His words were half-truths and half-lies. Other than the fact that he really didn't want others to know that this matter had something to do with the World Commerce Chamber. Everything else was a lie. The reason was that the current World Commerce Chamber's business was very simple, and he didn't want to make it too complicated. At the moment, the World Commerce Chamber didn't have the strength to clash with other sects, so it was fine as long as the other sects got used to the World Commerce Chamber's existence. Under such a simple situation, suddenly purchasing a large amount of beast cores that didn't have much use for them, it would be hard not to attract attention. This matter concerned by Suzhen's myriad demonic heart sutra, so it was better to be careful. After careful consideration, Yu Qianqiu decided to trick Wan Gutong into doing it. The other party's business was complicated and large. Adding one more item wouldn't attract any attention. The three of them had a look of realization on their faces, so they were here on a mission from the Immortal Palace. He was right. If the World Commerce Chamber directly purchased the beast cores, there might really be people who would cause trouble, such as the Heartless Palace. Since Sect Master Yu has already put it this way, it wouldn't be right for me, Wan Gutong, to not help. Wan Lihong heaved a sigh of relief, laughing heartily. But I wonder if Sect Master Yu has any specific requirements for purchasing beast cores? If you do, why don't you mention them all at once, lest any mistakes ruin Sect Master Yu's plans? Exalted Wan is indeed a straightforward person. If there's anything you need this Yu's help with in the future, this Yu will definitely not hesitate to help. Since the other party had agreed to help, Yu Qianqiu immediately offered an empty promise. Don't underestimate this empty promise, but it caused Wan Lihong and the others' eyes to light up. Yu Qianqiu then went back to the main topic. There are some requirements. We don't want beast cores below the demigod transformation stage. The higher the cultivation, the better. Beast cores must be at least adult beast cores, the older the better. We should try our best to avoid a situation where a large number of beast cores are the same. Also, I'll have to trouble your sect to keep this matter a secret. I don't want other sects to know about it. You don't have to worry about that. Wan Lihong laughed heartily. Wan Ling was also grinning from the side. But Wan Gi frowned, interrupting. Beast cores are easier to obtain, but beast cores are troublesome. They come from very few sources. I'm afraid it won't be easy to purchase them in large quantities. The other two immediately stopped laughing. They knew that Wan Gai was more experienced in this aspect than they were. After all, he had been in the hallucinatory immortal city for so many years. If he said it would be difficult, then it was most likely not far from the truth. Just do your best, there's no need to force it. Yu Qianqiu said solemnly. He sighed inwardly. It was indeed as Wei Chuanqiu had said. Looks like he still had to make a trip to the Godly Ruins realm to think of a way. To others, the Godly Ruins realm could only be entered once every 100 years. But to Yu Qianqiu, as long as he was brave enough, he could enter the Godly Ruins realm at any time he wanted. Both sides agreed on the purchase price, but Wan Lihong was adamant about not accepting the remuneration Huang Xiaolong had to give to Wan Gutong. Yu Qianqiu did not insist, but he was someone who could afford to let go. Without further ado, He directly threw out 10 billion divine-grade spirit stones to Wan Gudong. Chapter 919. Wan Liheng then personally asked Wan Buosheng, who was far away in the Myriad Saints' palace. Wan Buosheng had no objections and agreed on the spot. After getting Wan Buosheng's approval, Wan Gui patted his chest and took charge of the matter, saying that he would personally arrange it. Yu Qianqiu was naturally very grateful for this. After arranging this matter, Yu Qianqiu took his leave and returned to the World Chamber of Commerce. After thinking along the way back to the World Chamber of Commerce, the first thing he did was to gather all the feudal lords to the conference room on the 21st floor to unify their thoughts. There was no other way. Many things could not be delayed any longer and had to be resolved. He had to hunt ferocious beasts in the ruins of God to obtain their cores, think of a way to get a pass to the netherworld, and think of a way to get a pill recipe from the Skyward Palace. Each of these things was very important to him, but he had a large group of people but no competent assistants. This made him a little anxious. Sometimes, he even wanted to send all the feudal lords back to the human world and work alone. However, he also knew that this was somewhat unrealistic. He could not learn from Master Bai Changchun and be a loner, cultivating on his own, and moving forward wholeheartedly, not caring about anything else. The old fellow was having fun fighting and killing, and he did not even care about his descendants. In the end, he disappeared, causing him, as his disciple, to worry every day. He even had to think of a way to go to the netherworld to find out if he was dead or alive. Most importantly, he could not stand living a pure and desireless life like Master Bai Changchun, who told him to love life and to like beauties. In the end, he had too many fetters. If he wanted the people he cared about to live a good life, and if he wanted to live a good life, he had to have enough power in the three realms. To put it bluntly, he had to contend for hegemony and nurture a large group of people to help him solve his problems. Only with enough power could he live a leisurely life. Of course, the fastest way to have a huge power was to have a frighteningly high cultivation and make everyone submit to him. However, the idea of cultivating alone and becoming the #1 expert in the three realms was very childish in Yu Qianqiu's eyes. There was always only one first place. Although Yu Qianqiu had fantasized about such a miracle happening to him, fantasies could only be fantasies. He did not think that the first place would fall to him. People had to be more realistic. Before fantasies could happen to them, they had to face reality. For example, Jin Tai and Bai Qi could move freely in the three realms with their cultivation, but they still held the power of the netherworld and immortal realms. After all, it was impossible for the person he cared about to stay by his side and protect him forever. Therefore, he still had to lead a group of people to fight for power in the three realms. Even Wu Xiong could send golden-robed guards to protect Mu Tianjiao before she married him. Who would dare to touch Mu Tianjiao when she walked around the immortal world? This was the symbol of power, and now was the time to harden his heart and solve the problem. He would kill anyone who stood in his way. It was useless to reason with this group of people who were tired of living. It was all thanks to Mu Bing that Yu Qianqiu could be so ruthless. If he didn't take revenge, he wouldn't be a man. Yu Qianqiu had to unify his subordinates' thoughts. He did not want them to drag him down. Everyone was gathered in the conference room. They looked at Yu Qianqiu, not knowing why he had gathered them. Yu Qianqiu looked at them and said, "Someone has been grumbling. What I want to say is that earning money is not the most important thing. I won't say anything else. I just want to tell everyone to obediently guard those broken immortal herbs and continue to sell them. It doesn't matter if you can sell them or not. Just treat it as a show. As for what outsiders say, there's no need to care about what they say. In short, you guys have to be relaxed on the outside, but tense on the inside. Don't cause any trouble to distract me. There's no need to beat the drum. That's all. Disperse." Yu Qianqiu left. The eyes of the remaining people lit up. Although the sect leader did not speak much, everyone knew what was going on. It seemed like everyone was just fooling around here on the surface. There was actually something going on behind the scenes. On the rooftop, the wind was gentle and the sun was bright. White clouds floated past in the sky. Yu Qianqiu silently walked to the white jade railing. He looked at the flowing lights in the distance with a serious expression. After a long silence, Yun Peng, who was at the side, tilted his head and looked at him in surprise. He thought to himself, "This fellow has always been running around without stopping. Why is he in the mood to come here and look at the scenery today?" The cool breeze blew gently. Time passed bit by bit. Yun Peng, who had always liked peace, could not help but look into the distance and asked, "I heard from the great bright wheel that you were chased out of the paradise wonderland?" "Yes. I was almost killed. What a great humiliation." Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly, "But it doesn't matter. There's nothing strange about something like this. But it's impolite not to reciprocate. I will return it to them sooner or later." "Oh," Yun Peng replied nonchalantly. After a moment of silence, he tilted his head to look at him and asked, "Is there something on your mind?" "No, I just came to look at my territory. It wasn't easy to get a foothold here. I'm worried that someone will touch my territory. If that happens, I will be very unhappy." Yu Qianqiu looked ahead and said, "This is the hallucination immortal city. With the immortal palace, who dares to cause trouble in the hallucination immortal city? But I'm still living under someone else's roof. I'm getting a little impatient from waiting," Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, and turned to leave. Yun Peng turned back to look at his back and frowned. In a vast swamp that stretched as far as the eye could see, there were several towering mountains connected to each other. One of the mountains in the middle was scorched black. The mountain was full of caves of all sizes. There were stone stairs cut out of the mountain walls that connected the caves to each other. Many people could be seen coming and going on the stone stairs. It was very magnificent. The only drawback of this mountain was that there was almost no green vegetation. On the other hand, the few mountains on the side were lush with houses faintly discernible in the midst of the greenery. There was a suspension bridge between the mountains with iron chains. There were people swaying on it leisurely. A large area of the swamp at the foot of the mountain was like boiling water, constantly bubbling with large and small bubbles. The rising water mist shrouded several mountains that were not too high in the clouds and mist. The 8 adjacent mountains were of different heights. They were arranged like a crescent moon. Those who were familiar with them would know that this was where the Heaven Palace, the #1 alchemy sect in the immortal realm, was located. The scorched black mountain in the middle was the important alchemy ground of the Heaven Palace. The first mountain to the right of the east was the residence of the disciples of the Heaven Palace, who were doing odd jobs. They were all disciples who had not reached the immortal stage. Shui Mingqing walked out of a cave on the Black Mountain. He had just helped Master Yi deliver the immortal herbs needed for alchemy. Master Yi needed a lot of time to refine pills, so he didn't need to accompany him. During the time before Master Yi finished his alchemy, he was free to do as he pleased. After leaving the cave, Shui Mingqing stood on the stone stairs and couldn't help but look at the first mountain on the right. He sighed with emotion. Not long ago, he had been living there like a slave. After a trip to the Divine Ruin Realm, his fate had completely changed. He had actually become an elder's disciple. So he had finally moved out of that messy, crowded place where people could beat and scold him. Now he had his own small courtyard to live in. Although this small courtyard belonged to Master Yi, and he only occupied a room inside, it was better than sleeping in a room with more than a dozen people. The reason for such a big change was all thanks to Yu Qianqiu. Thinking of Yu Qianqiu, he couldn't help but think of how Yu Qianqiu had asked him to steal the pill formulas of the Heaven Palace. Just thinking about it made him shudder. Shui Mingqing tilted his head and looked at the adjacent mountain on the left. It was also the tallest of the 8 mountains. The scripture-seeking pavilion where the pill formulas were stored was on the pavilion at the top of the mountain. Shui Mingqing sighed and shook his head. He definitely couldn't get the pill formulas. Even if he could, he couldn't steal them for Yu Qianqiu. The pill formulas were the foundation of the Heaven Palace. If the foundation of the Heaven Palace was broken, even the Heaven Palace would have no future. So how could he have a future? Without thinking about it, Shui Mingqing flew toward the 3rd mountain on the right and landed at the door of a small courtyard halfway up the mountain. He was about to push the door open and enter when he suddenly found a person standing on the top of a big tree, not far to the left. The person's back was facing him, and he didn't know what he was looking at. Shui Mingqing wanted to ask who the person was, but when he saw that the person was wearing the clothes of the sect and standing leisurely with his hands behind his back, he took a closer look and found that he couldn't see through the person's cultivation. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. The person who dared to put on airs in front of the elders must be a senior expert of the sect. He was not someone he could provoke. Shui Mingqing pushed the door open and silently entered the courtyard. In the courtyard, he couldn't help but look back. He found that the person's clothes seemed to be a little big, but this was not something he worried about. He entered the room on the left and closed the door. That was his room. After entering the room, Shui Mingqing immediately found that the room seemed to be missing something. His gaze fell on the window sill and found that the golden Buddha he had placed on the window sill had been moved, and the clothes he had casually thrown on the bed were gone. Someone had entered his room. Shui Mingqing glanced around and was slightly shocked. He was worried that someone had also broken into Master Yafa's room. So he quickly opened the door and flashed into the courtyard. Just as he landed at the door of the main room, he heard someone laughing behind him. "Brother Shui, why are you in such a panic?" Shui Mingqing looked back and was shocked. "Yu Qianqiu." He saw Yu Qianqiu looking at him with a smile. He was wearing a slightly large gray robe, which was the uniform of the Palace of Heaven. He couldn't help but look at the big tree where there had been someone before. The person on the top of the tree had disappeared. He immediately understood everything. "What? Don't you welcome me?" Yu Qianqiu asked with a smile. Shui Mingqing quickly looked around, grabbed Yu Qianqiu's arm, and quickly pulled him into his room and closed the door. He asked with a terrified expression, "Why are you here?" Chapter 920. Then his expression relaxed, and he answered his own question with sudden realization. "I know. You must be here to discuss the purchase of elixirs with our sect." He found a reason to comfort himself. Otherwise, he couldn't figure out how Yu Qianqiu came here. "Purchase elixirs?" Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and snorted coldly. "It's enough to be snubbed once. To tell you the truth, I snuck in." "Snuck in?" Shui Mingqing almost jumped up in shock. He hurriedly opened the door and ran outside to look around. After confirming that there was no one, he hurriedly ran back in and closed the door. He said in fear, "My Chaotian Palace has a mountain protecting formation. If someone trespasses, they will be discovered immediately. How could you break in?" "What a joke." Yu Qianqiu walked to his couch and sat down. He said proudly, "I come and go as I please. Your Chaotian Palace's mountain protecting formation can't stop me." Now that things had come to this, Shui Mingqing no longer cared about how capable he was. Looking at the clothes he was wearing, he flashed over and pulled on his sleeves, saying nervously, "Brother you're too daring. Since you snuck in, how dare you run around outside in my clothes? No one saw you before, right?" "Of course someone saw me," Yu Qianqiu said disapprovingly. "What?" Shui Mingqing exclaimed. "Who saw you? Did he recognize you?" He couldn't help but be nervous. Everyone in Chaotian Palace knew that he had a close relationship with Yu Qianqiu. If someone saw Yu Qianqiu here, it would be difficult for him to get rid of the responsibility. "Look at how scared you are." Yu Qianqiu laughed and said, "Aren't you the one who saw me?" Shui Mingqing was stunned. He knew that he was joking, and he immediately breathed a sigh of relief. However, just as he heaved a sigh of relief, Yu Qianqiu's next sentence made him jump up in shock. Yu Qianqiu then said in a low voice, "I looked at the terrain of your Chaotian Palace from the outside, and stood there for some time. There were also people coming and going, but I don't know if they noticed me or not. Actually, you don't have to be afraid. There are so many disciples in your Skyward Palace, and I'm wearing your clothes. Who would know who I am?" The moment he said that, Shui Mingqing was shocked again. Yu Qianqiu frowned and waved his hand to stop him. "Stop. I say, why are you so timid? What's there to be afraid of? My client isn't afraid, so what are you afraid of? What's more, I've checked all the rooms in your courtyard. There's no one there at all. You don't have to be afraid of even the air, do you?" He said it casually, but how could Shui Mingqing compare to him? What kind of dangerous things had he not done in his previous life? Sometimes, he specialized in taking risks out of desperation. His courage had long been trained to be incomparably fat and strong. He was a master who could jump on the tip of a knife 3 times fast and 4 times slow. For him, danger was already a common occurrence. Although Shui Mingqing had cultivated for so many years, he had not experienced anything at all. The last trip to the Divine Ruin Realm was already the biggest battle he had seen, and it could be said that he had gained some courage and knowledge. However, compared to his boldness, it was not on the same level at all. There was no comparison. In addition, Shui Mingqing had been oppressed by the despotic power of the Chaotian Palace for many years, so he instinctively trembled with fear here, which could not be compared to outside. Now that Yu Qianqiu had come here to cause trouble, it would be strange if he was not afraid. This was just like how the lords of various countries would be afraid when they heard of the Demon Ghost region's torture master. Brother Yu, Shui Mingqing grabbed his arm with both hands and almost begged. You also know how difficult it was for me to get to where I am today. In the Divine Ruin Realm, all my brothers and sisters died, and I was the only one who managed to escape with my life. Now, I walk on thin ice every day, not daring to have the slightest accident. I really don't want to go back to the past. Brother Yu, I beg you, if you sneak in like this, then sneak out like this. How about this? Shui Mingqing pointed out the window and said, in the swamp 200 miles northwest of our Chaotian Palace, there are a few scattered islands. Brother Yu, you go out first, and I will find a reason to go out later. We will meet there, and if there is anything we want to say, we can say it there. What do you think? Yu Qianqiu frowned slightly, looked at his arm that was being hugged, and suddenly realized that he was wrong, and very wrong. This Shui Mingqing was a person who could not be helped up. His cowardice was already in his bones. No matter how much support was given, he would not be able to achieve anything in the Chaotian Palace. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly in his heart. Not to mention that he would not do as he said. Even if he did as he said, how could he go to the scattered islands 200 miles northwest of the Chaotian Palace? He admitted that he did not have the ability to break through the mountain protection formation of the Chaotian Palace, and if he used the golden bead to transfer, he could only return to the Fantasy Immortal City first, and then fly from the Fantasy Immortal City to the scattered islands. What a joke! Let go of your hand, Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. Shui Mingqing was stunned and let go of his hand in embarrassment. As soon as he said this, Yu Qianqiu himself felt that his tone was a little too much, so he put on a smile and stood up, patted Shui Mingqing on the shoulder, and said with a smile, when did I hurt you? Don't worry, since I dare to do this, I naturally have confidence that I will not let you be implicated. As he said this, he walked to the window sill, picked up the golden Buddha statue that he had given to Shui Mingqing, and looked at it. When he put it back, he said casually, I have looked around the various rooms in the courtyard. It seems that you should live with your master. Your master is very good to you. By the way, when will your master come back? After being scolded by him, Shui Mingqing suddenly became a lot more well-behaved, and no longer looked like he was going to die. He followed behind him and replied, he is going to refine a batch of elixirs for the sect, and he will probably be in seclusion for 10 days to half a month. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, then you don't have to worry even more. Come with me. He walked to the door, opened the door and walked out. Shui Mingqing helplessly followed him to the courtyard, but he saw that he flew up to the tree outside the courtyard. Come up. Yu Qianqiu turned back and waved at him. Shui Mingqing helplessly flashed up to the tree, but he timidly looked around. Yu Qianqiu stared at him, and narrowed his eyes slightly. Then he pointed to a few mountains in the Swamp Kingdom that had a unique charm and asked, which mountain is the scripture-seeking pavilion on? Ah, be still. After being shocked for a while, Shui Mingqing immediately changed to a voice transmission and asked, do you really want to steal the elixir recipe of the Chaotian Palace? Do you think it's possible? Yu Qianqiu knew that he was worried, and also changed to a voice transmission to communicate. I just came to your Chaotian Palace to take a look. The matter of the elixir recipe is already in the past, so don't mention it again. Your Chaotian Palace is really interesting to actually have a foothold in this swamp. It must be because of the underground fire below. Shui Mingqing was skeptical of his words, but he still pointed to the tallest of the 8 mountains and sighed. The pavilion on the tallest mountain is the Scripture-Seeking Pavilion. The Scripture-Seeking Pavilion is divided into 2 pavilions, east and west, with a total of 5 floors. The East Pavilion has elixir recipes, and the West Pavilion is the collection of cultivation methods in the sect. Each floor is guarded by an expert in the sect, and only those who meet the corresponding conditions can enter the corresponding floor. If you want to read the elixir recipe, you must first get the permission of your master, accompanied by his master as a guarantee, before you can enter to read, and you can only read one type at a time. The reason why he was so detailed was that he was more or less afraid that Yu Qianqiu still had the idea of getting lucky. So he let him know how powerful it was to dispel that idea. Oh, this rule is really strange. Wouldn't it be more comfortable for the master to directly teach? Why would there be so many rules and make it so troublesome? Yu Qianqiu countered with a question. Could it be that there's some kind of explanation behind this? Of course. Shui Mingqing didn't know what to do with him, so he could only explain. Having the master as a guarantee is to ensure that the supervision is in place, and at the same time, for the sake of seriousness and for the safety of the Scripture-Seeking Pavilion. Letting the disciples go to the Scripture-Seeking Pavilion to choose their own elixir recipes to refer to, instead of forcing them to cultivate, is to bring out the strengths of the disciples. Alchemy is more or less about talent, and everyone can make elixirs, but the probability of success is very different. If there is no rule and everyone tries to make elixirs at will, with so many disciples in the Chaotian Palace, the consumption of immortal herbs alone will not be able to bear. Only one kind of elixir recipe is allowed to be cultivated at a time, more or less for this reason, and the elixir recipe this time must also reach a certain success standard before they have the chance to continue to cultivate the next elixir recipe. Yu Qianqiu nodded to show that he understood. Seeing that Shui Mingqing had been worried about the flowing light that passed by from time to time in the sky, he said very considerately, "You should go back, in case someone finds out and implicates you." "What about you?" Shui Mingqing asked nervously. Yu Qianqiu shrugged disapprovingly and said, "It's rare for me to come to the Chaotian Palace, so I'll walk around." Shui Mingqing was immediately speechless. However, Yu Qianqiu flashed back to the courtyard and went into the house. Shui Mingqing followed him in and saw that Yu Qianqiu took out a human skin mask and stuck it on his face. After carefully fiddling with it for a while, he turned into a living person, which stunned Shui Mingqing. Nowadays, there was still someone who used such an old-fashioned method. Yu Qianqiu took a mirror and looked at himself left and right. After finding that there were no flaws, he put away the mirror and touched his face. He chuckled with satisfaction and said, "I knew you'd am back again. Brother Shui, what do you think?" Shui Mingqing was speechless and stunned for a while, then said nervously, "Brother Yu, what do you want to do? Do you still want to get the elixir formula?" "I've already said that I'm going to walk around the Chaotian Palace. I just changed my appearance, because I don't want to implicate you." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, "I'll go out for a walk first and come back later." "Ah, you still want to come back?" Seeing that Yu Qianqiu had already walked out of the door, Shui Mingqing immediately chased after him and shouted, Brother Yu, where are you going?" He chased him all the way out of the courtyard. Yu Qianqiu said unhurriedly as he walked, "Don't follow me anymore. If you continue to follow me, it'll be hard for you not to be implicated. Don't worry. I knew you'd never get into trouble when I go around." Shui Mingqing did not dare to chase him anymore. Looking at Yu Qianqiu walking away along the mountain steps in the forest, his expression kept twitching. He never thought that the Chaotian Palace, which was as majestic as a mountain in his heart, and had to be careful, was like a leisurely garden in the eyes of Yu Qianqiu. Chapter 921. As he walked up the stairs, Yu Qianqiu seemed to be leisurely, but in fact, he was tense on the inside and relaxed on the outside. He did not dare to slack off. He understood that this was the lair of Chaotian Palace, and it was also a place where there were many masters. The more nervous he appeared, the easier it was to arouse suspicion. Along the way, he met many disciples of Chaotian Palace, and he always held his head high, like this was his home. Those disciples did not know him, and they could not see through his cultivation, so they all stood on the side of the road and made way for him. The forest was as dark as ink, and the thin mist rising from the swamp filled the forest, making the air extremely humid. Yu Qianqiu went around to the back of the mountain, and after getting out of Shui Mingqing's sight, he looked around, threw a small silver ball into the forest grass, and then slowly flew to the highest of the 8 mountains. The sutra-seeking pavilion at the top of the mountain was like a large dark monster, lying there, giving people a gloomy feeling. There were people flying around the mountain, and there were people coming in and out of the sutra-seeking pavilion. No one cared about the arrival of Yu Qianqiu. When he landed outside the sutra-seeking pavilion, Yu Qianqiu found that the entire sutra-seeking pavilion was actually made of meteoric iron. Meteoric iron was a common material in the celestial realm to make ordinary magic tools. He did not expect that Chaotian Palace would use it to build the sutra-seeking pavilion. As Shui Mingqing said, the sutra-seeking pavilion had a total of 5 floors. The eaves on all sides were like towers, and the layers were like sealed boxes. On one side of each floor, there were 2 round windows that looked like the eyes of a monster, which were also sealed with fine fences. People came and went from the sutra-seeking pavilion. Yu Qianqiu walked around the sutra-seeking pavilion. When he passed the gate, he found that there was another floor under the sutra-seeking pavilion, which was similar to a basement. There should be 6 floors in the sutra-seeking pavilion. There must be people guarding below, which immediately extinguished his hope of escaping underground. The most helpless thing was that he found that there was no way to get close to the sutra-seeking pavilion. There were people sitting cross-legged with their eyes closed in the 4 corners of the pavilion. Yu Qianqiu could not see through their cultivation. Although their eyes were closed, Yu Qianqiu believed that as long as he got close, they would be able to detect him. Yu Qianqiu was eager to know the structure inside. If he couldn't even figure out the situation inside, how could he start? After making another round, Yu Qianqiu didn't dare to stay any longer. It seemed like he was the only one wandering around outside, and it would be hard not to attract suspicion if he stayed for too long. He followed the stone steps down the mountain. When he was halfway up the mountain, he saw the mist floating in front of him. Suddenly, his eyes lit up and he had an idea. Walking quickly to the dense forest, he quickly flashed into the depths of the dense forest on the mountainside, found a secret place, and directly burrowed into the ground. Not long after, he saw that the ground began to emit a thick fog, gradually spreading and blending into the thin fog of the mountain. It's broad daylight. Why is the fog so thick? The temperature of the earth fire has probably risen. The temperature of the fire is high and low, so it is estimated that a lot of defective pills will be produced. Those novice alchemists are probably out of luck, and it is inevitable that they will be punished. 2 disciples of the Skyward Palace, who walked out of the sutra-seeking pavilion against the thick fog, looked at each other, smiled, and left quickly, quite gloating. In the Skyward Palace, the phenomenon of thick fog lingering around was very normal, and it had a lot to do with the location of the Skyward Palace. Everyone had long been accustomed to it. After the thin fog slowly invaded the sutra-seeking pavilion, Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding underground in the dense forest, was overjoyed. Wherever the thin fog went, the layout of the sutra-seeking pavilion gradually appeared in his mind. The east and west pavilions of the sutra-seeking pavilion were divided by the main entrance and stairs. In the west pavilion, there were obviously more people reading cultivation methods than in the east pavilion. The doors of the east and west pavilions on each floor were opposite each other, and there was a small room in the concave between the 2 pavilions, where there was a master sitting. At the door of the east pavilion on each floor, there were some people guarding outside the door to keep an eye on the disciples inside. This was probably what Shui Mingqing had said, the masters who supervised the disciples to choose the pill recipes. However, the higher the level, the fewer people there were. There was almost no one in the East Pavilion on the 4th floor, and the East Pavilion on the 5th floor was empty. Even the situation in the West Pavilion was similar. Obviously, the higher the level of things, the fewer people could come into contact with it. After getting a general idea of the layout of the sutra-seeking pavilion, Yu Qianqiu withdrew his perception. He did not dare to let his perception explore unscrupulously inside, for fear of being discovered. Although he had a general idea of the situation, what made Yu Qianqiu depressed was how to enter the sutra-seeking pavilion. After hiding underground and frowning for a while, a bitter smile flashed in his eyes. He cut one of his fingers and forced out 2 drops of blood. Suddenly, a red fog appeared from the thick fog rising from the depths of the forest. As the fog spread, it gradually thinned and eventually disappeared without a trace in the vast sea of fog. It was so fine that it was hard to see with the naked eye. After drifting for a while, the red fog split into 2 and surged silently through the windows of the East and West pavilions on the top floor of the sutra-seeking pavilion. Bit by bit, they gradually gathered in a corner. In the end, a small dot of red was left in an inconspicuous corner of the East and West pavilions. After doing this, Yu Qianqiu heaved a sigh of relief. He rubbed his hands together excitedly and disappeared underground. When he reappeared, he was in the meeting room of Utopia's military camp. The door to the meeting room was tightly shut. Zhang Peng was the only one standing guard inside, and there was a pile of jade archives on the table. When he saw Yu Qianqiu, Zhang Peng stood up and bowed. "Master." Yu Qianqiu swept his gaze across the table and asked, "Is everything ready?" Zhang Peng solemnly replied, "Everything is ready. After writing it down in the jade archives, should I give the pill formula to Chief Chen?" Yu Qianqiu frowned and gave an irrelevant answer. "How are the people I asked you to keep an eye on?" Chief Preceptor Guan is very calm, but Chief Chen's mood and condition seem to be worsening. Right. That woman made her son acknowledge Master's wife as his godmother. Both mother and son spend most of their time with Master's wife. It seems like they're on good terms with her, Zhang Peng reported. "I hope they won't do anything that I have no choice but to do. Continue keeping an eye on them." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the jade archives on the table. He pointed at them and said, "Other than you, don't let anyone else know about this, including your master's wife. As for the immortal herb garden, send someone to keep an eye on it. You should understand what I mean." "Understood." Zhang Peng cupped his fists with a serious expression. Yu Qianqiu nodded and disappeared from the meeting room. In the eastern pavilion of the scripture-seeking pavilion in Skyward Palace, Yu Qianqiu quietly appeared and floated in the room. He did not dare to move around, afraid that he would be discovered if he made any noise. He looked around and immediately pressed his hand against his chest in relief. Perhaps it was because no one had come to the 5th floor yet. The door was tightly shut. Even if someone were to pass by, they would not be able to see him. This gave him a sense of security. Inside the room, there were many jade archives hanging on silk threads. He estimated that there were more than 100 of them. They were clearly the jade archives for pill formulas. Without any hesitation, Yu Qianqiu started from the corner of the room. He inserted his divine sense into one of the jade archives and saw that it was indeed a pill formula. Unfortunately, these jade archives for pill formulas could neither be copied nor stolen. However, he was prepared for this. Without another word, he took out a jade archive and repeated it as he recorded. He then transmitted his voice directly to Zhang Peng, who was in the meeting room in Utopia's military camp. The reason why he wanted the two of them to record it together was mainly because he was afraid that they would make a mistake if they were pressed for time. He still had to compare the contents of the jade archives after they were done. This way he could be more certain. Meanwhile, Zhang Peng, who was in Utopia, focused his attention and started writing rapidly on the blank jade archives. The two of them worked together at lightning speed. Yu Qianqiu swept through the rows of jade archives. In just a few hours, he had stolen the contents of nearly 100 jade archives for pill formulas from the entire Eastern Pavilion on the 5th floor. After he was done, the sky outside gradually darkened. Yu Qianqiu reached out and gently pressed his hand against the meteoric metal wall. He quietly sensed the movements in the entire scripture-seeking pavilion and realized that the number of people downstairs was gradually decreasing. He checked the color of the sky outside through the window and decided to hide there until it turned dark. As he expected, once the sky turned dark, the people on the lower floors gradually left. Not long after, the doors of the eastern and western pavilions on the lower floors began to close one after another. This was exactly what he wanted. He directly fell upside down, his head piercing through the meteoric metal floor and appearing on the ceiling of the fourth floor. He had a panoramic view of the situation in the rooms on the fourth floor. Seeing that there was no one else around, he emerged from the ceiling and quietly floated in the air. The number of jade archives hanging in the rooms on the fourth floor was double that of the ones on the fifth floor. Time was precious. Yu Qianqiu immediately made use of the time to repeat the jade archives one by one. After spending a few hours quickly clearing the fourth floor, he used the same method to enter the third floor. In the end, he discovered that the number of jade archives on the third floor was another 100 or so more than on the fourth floor. Hence, he immediately started copying them. By the time he was done with the third floor, the sky was already beginning to brighten. Taking advantage of the fact that no one had arrived yet, he went back to the second floor and continued. He managed to get close to 200 jade archives. When he heard someone coming up to the second floor, he immediately memorized the location of the jade archive that he had yet to finish and quickly disappeared. He did not escape. Instead, he appeared in the western pavilion on the fifth floor and began to steal the cultivation manuals from Skyward Palace. After he was done with the cultivation manuals in the western pavilion on the fifth floor, he discovered that there were already 2 people in the fourth floor. Hence, he gave up on the idea of continuing and prepared to continue at night. After returning to Utopia's conference room, the master and disciple listed the items they had stolen on the floors. Each of them took half of the items and started comparing them to see if there were any areas that they could not match up. In the end, after checking, they found that there were indeed areas that did not match up due to their speed. However, it did not matter. The 2 of them picked out the areas that did not match up and prepared to go back and check the originals to make changes. After the sky turned dark, Yu Qianqiu snuck back to the second floor of the eastern pavilion and continued what he had not finished. After he was done with the second floor, he continued on to the first floor. As there were too many pill recipes in the basket on the first floor, he spent the entire night, but was still unable to finish them. He only came back the next night and spent another half of the night before he was finally done with all the pill recipes in the entire eastern pavilion. The cultivation manuals in the few floors of the western pavilion were much fewer compared to the pill recipes. However, on the other hand, the contents of the cultivation manuals were many times more than the contents of the pill recipes. For the sake of the items in the western pavilion, Yu Qianqiu worked for a total of 5 nights. The master and disciple stole at night and quickly checked the items during the day. In the end, they discovered that there were close to 100 mistakes. Hence, Yu Qianqiu spent a lot of time running back to check them. In the end, after calculating the time, it took him exactly 10 days to finally get his hands on the items that Skyward Palace had accumulated over the years. Chapter 922. What a pity. I can't get my hands on the sect leader of Skyward Palace. Those are the real treasures. Yu Qianqiu sighed as he looked at Zhang Peng, who was sorting through the jade archives. Under his orders, Zhang Peng was cataloging the names and effects of all the pills, so that it would be easier to find them in the future. After sorting through the cultivation methods, Zhang Peng became more and more excited. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Master, are these all cultivation methods from the immortal realm?" Yu Qianqiu replied with a mm. He didn't care much for these cultivation methods that required tens of thousands of years to be effective. After a pause, he said, "After sorting through the items, make a copy of the cultivation methods and keep it. When the time comes, see if there are any suitable ones for everyone to cultivate. But I warn you, it's not necessarily a good thing to practice too many miscellaneous things. Often when a cultivation method is mastered to the extreme, it will naturally be comprehended by analogy. That is the true power of a cultivation method. The reason why I brought these things here is to give everyone in the army more opportunities to choose. I hope that they will be able to choose the cultivation method that suits them and strive for perfection so that they can unleash greater power. That is what I want. I don't want everyone to just keep everything to themselves. Zhang Peng nodded in agreement. Yu Qianqiu put on the airs of a master, then gave a few more instructions and left. During these 10 days, Shui Mingqing was unable to eat or sleep. Yu Qianqiu had gone out for 10 days, but he still hadn't returned. After wandering around Skyward Palace for such a long time, Shui Mingqing's scalp went numb at the thought of it. How could there be such a crazy person? He was worried that something had happened to Yu Qianqiu, but more importantly, he was worried that he would be implicated. After waiting for 10 days and still not seeing Yu Qianqiu return, he had already come to the conclusion that Yu Qianqiu had either left, been killed, or been captured. However, there had been no movement from Skyward Palace during this time, so the possibility of the former was higher. What worried him was that Yu Qianqiu should have told him before leaving. Thus, he thought too much and scared himself. He wandered around in his room like a headless fly, and often went outside the courtyard to look around. Today, after wandering outside for a long time, as soon as he returned to his room, he saw a smiling Yu Qianqiu sitting on his bed. Shui Mingqing was startled for a moment before he exclaimed, "You're finally back. You've always been in our sect." "Hee. How could I stroll around for so long? I went back for a while." Yu Qianqiu jumped down from the couch and said with a smile, "I forgot to tell you before I left. I was afraid that you would be worried, so I came back to see you again. This might be the last time. I might not have the chance to disturb you again." Shui Mingqing was speechless when he heard this. Could it be that the mountain protecting formation of the Skyward Palace was just a decoration, and outsiders could come in whenever they wanted? This loophole was way too big. However, when he thought about it, he felt that something was amiss. He could not help but ask suspiciously, "There are 2 celestial provinces between the illusory immortal city and the Heaven Palace. It has only been 10 days, and you have already come back and forth? Could it be that brother Yu has never left the Heaven Palace?" He thought about it and compared it in his heart. Even with his master's cultivation, it was impossible for him to come back so quickly, let alone Yu Qianqiu. "Hee. To be honest, the secret of me coming back so quickly is over there." Yu Qianqiu pointed to the golden Buddha on the windowsill and explained with a smile, "This golden statue actually has a teleportation formation that I set up. It was only a blink of an eye for me to come here from the illusory immortal city. This is also the reason why I had to give you this golden statue back then. At first, it was to make it convenient for me to steal the pill formula from the Heaven Palace. Now that it seems that there is no hope, I will leave it here so that I can visit you at any time in the future." Teleportation formation. Shui Mingqing looked at the golden statue in confusion because he had never heard of such a thing. Actually, it's similar to a communication formation. Yu Qianqiu immediately explained the concept of the teleportation formation, causing Shui Mingqing to be dumbfounded. It turned out that there were teleportation coordinates in his room. It was no wonder that the other party could come and go as he pleased. The Heaven Palace's mountain protection formation could not do anything to him. "All right. I came back to tell you about this. I still have some matters to attend to at the World Trade Association, so I'll head back first." Yu Qianqiu pointed at the golden Buddha and said with a smile, "Don't break this thing. Once it's broken, I won't be able to visit you next time." With that, he waved goodbye and disappeared from the room. Actually, he did not return to the World Trade Association. Instead, he stood on a mountain peak in Utopia. His clothes fluttered in the wind. Yu Qianqiu looked into the distance coldly and stood quietly alone on the mountain peak. Then he slowly closed his eyes. Teleportation formation. Shui Mingqing looked at the tightly shut doors and windows. If he had teleported away, there must be a space that allowed him to leave. However, the doors and windows were tightly shut, and Yu Qianqiu had disappeared into thin air just like that. This forced him to believe Yu Qianqiu's words. After being stupefied for a while, the expression on his face became a bit angry. Then he rushed to the window and grabbed the golden statue with both hands, wanting to destroy it. However, he felt a bit of fear towards Yu Qianqiu, so he didn't dare to do anything. This time, Master is not here. If you come again and Master finds out, I won't be able to explain myself, even if I have mouths all over my body. Shui Mingqing found an excuse for himself, but he could not make up his mind, and could not do it for a long time. After pondering for a while, his furrowed brows relaxed. He looked at the golden statue in his hands and said, "Brother Yu, I didn't destroy this. It was accidentally destroyed by my master. I believe you won't blame me for this, right?" He had finally found a reason to report to Yu Qianqiu in the future. He exerted force with both hands, and with an ear-piercing sound of metal grinding against each other, a lifelike golden Buddha turned into a golden fried dough twist in his hands. Yu Qianqiu, who was standing alone on the mountain peak, suddenly opened his eyes. Black flames flashed in his eyes, and a black fire broadsword appeared in his hands. As he swung it horizontally, he disappeared from the mountain peak. Shui Mingqing, who was twisting the golden Buddha into a twist, suddenly felt a chill on his neck. He suddenly reacted and wanted to turn his head to look, but he realized that he could not move his neck at all. He only saw that there was a black broadsword under his neck, and then he found that his eyelids were a little heavy. The scene in front of him changed, and his neck finally turned around. He saw the person that he did not want to see the most at this moment. Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu held the broadsword with both hands, and stared indifferently at the human head on the broadsword. He said, "Brother Shui, I have personally come to send you off. After all, we are friends, and I did not want to make a move on you. I have already given you a chance. I just told you not to destroy this golden statue. This is your last chance, and it can also be said to be a test. But you just had to go against me. Do you know who I hate the most now? I hate ingrates the most. I personally helped that ingrate moving up, and I do not want to help another ingrate who goes against me. Since I have the ability to help you up, I also have the ability to kill you with my own hands. Brother Shui, have a safe journey." He flipped the broadsword and put it into his sleeve. Shui Mingqing's head fell to the ground. He died with his eyes wide open, full of disbelief. Yu Qianqiu walked to the headless corpse that was still standing there, and took away the golden Buddha in its hand. The headless corpse suddenly lost its balance and fell to the ground with a bang. Yu Qianqiu's expression was abnormally calm, but his 5 fingers that were holding the golden Buddha had sunk deep into it. The golden Buddha gradually shrank into his palm, and he disappeared from the room. There was a headless corpse on the floor of the room. At this moment, the guard of the inscription room in the Palace of Heaven suddenly discovered that Shui Mingqing's nameplate had exploded. He immediately turned around and shouted, "Something has happened to Master Yi's disciple, Shui Mingqing. Immediately go to Master Yi's place and see what is going on." 2 figures turned into streams of light and flew away quickly. Not long after, when a stream of light returned, the Palace of Heaven immediately sent out a warning. What a joke! In the core of the Palace of Heaven, someone had been inexplicably killed. Moreover, it was the disciple of an elder. Such a thing could not be tolerated. With an order from the Palace of Heaven, countless streams of light flew out from several mountains, and quickly searched inside and outside for the murderer. Master Yi, who was refining pills, was also alarmed. He had to stop refining pills and quickly went to his courtyard. When he went to Shui Mingqing's room, and saw Shui Mingqing's decapitated body, his old face suddenly turned livid. Although it was a pity for this dead disciple, the murderer dared to kill his disciple in his courtyard. It was clear that he was slapping his face, and not giving him any face. Master Yi's first reaction was that someone was jealous that he had accepted a good disciple with a long face, so they took advantage of his absence to secretly kill him. He didn't think that it was an outsider who did it, because it was not easy for outsiders to break into the Palace of Heaven. If an outsider had the ability to break into the Palace of Heaven, why would he kill a little disciple in the soul formation stage? After Master Yi had been in contact with Shui Mingqing for a period of time, he had more or less understood Shui Mingqing. This disciple would not make enemies with anyone in the Palace of Heaven. Even after he followed him, he was humble and respectful to others, never putting on airs. But it was such a person that someone actually dared to kill him. If this wasn't for himself, then who was it for? Master Ye immediately flew into a rage. With a bang, he directly broke through the roof and floated in the air. He looked around and shouted angrily, "Who did it? Get the hell out!" His angry roar echoed in the air, but the chances of finding the murderer were too slim. On the 22nd floor of the World Chamber of Commerce, Yu Qianqiu routinely came to the door of Bai Suzhen's cultivation room to take a look. Wei Chuanxiu was still sitting cross-legged at the door with her eyes closed. She slightly opened her eyes to look at Yu Qianqiu, and found that Yu Qianqiu looked dispirited. She couldn't help but stare in amazement. "What have you been doing recently? How did you end up like this?" He had used his divine sense almost non-stop for 10 days in a row, and he had just ruthlessly killed one of his own people. His spirit was indeed very tired. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand. "Nothing, I'm going to rest." He left Wei Chuanxiu, who was fuming with anger, and walked away. Chapter 923. The conference room in Utopia's military camp was filled with a messy fragrance. 3 piles of immortal herbs that Zhang Peng had prepared were placed on the table. The immortal herbs that Yu Qianqiu had asked him to prepare for refining the Great Restriction Breaking Pill, Marrow Cleansing Pill, and Immortal Ascension Pill were all ready. Yu Qianqiu stood to the side and compared the 3 piles of immortal herbs with the pill formula Jade Archive. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he cradled the pill formula Jade Archive and memorized the refining methods for the 3 immortal pills. Only after he had memorized them did he put away the Jade Archive. Looking at the 3 piles of immortal herbs on the table, Yu Qianqiu silently demonstrated the refining process in his mind. After confirming that he was confident, he heaved a sigh of relief. Master was going to start refining the pills. Zhang Peng's face was filled with excitement. He had long heard from Guan Yu that his master's pill refining skills had already reached an extraordinary level. Even Utopia's #1 pill refining expert, Chen Feng, had said that compared to his master in the field of pill refining, it was like comparing a grain of rice to a bright moon. It was a pity that he had never seen it before. He didn't expect to see it with his own eyes today. Just as Zhang Peng subconsciously stepped back to make room, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand with a calm expression. The wind from his palm swept up close to 20 immortal herbs on the table. At the same time, light green flames shot out from Yu Qianqiu's palm like a tornado, separating the 20 immortal herbs into 3 piles in the air. Nearly 20 stalks of immortal grass melted into a paste at a visible speed, squirming together. Suddenly, the faint green flame spun even faster, and the paste wrapped within it turned into a series of afterimages, spinning at high speed. Refining 3 immortal pills at the same time. Oh my god! Zhang Peng was dumbfounded. He had been in Utopia for a long time, and had interacted with Chen Feng for a long time. He knew a little about pill refining, but this was the first time he had seen such a method of refining pills without using a furnace. 1 palm of fire controlled the refinement of 3 immortal pills, and close to 20 immortal herbs. There was no need to elaborate on the complicated changes. Zhang Peng finally understood what it meant to be at the pinnacle of perfection. It would not be an exaggeration to describe his master's ability to control fire as extraordinary. Suddenly, the swirling flames began to release waves of gray mist. Zhang Peng knew that this was the essence left behind after the impurities within the immortal herbs were removed. As the impurities were removed, the swirling shadows inside gradually brightened, turning into colorful ribbons that danced in the air. As the impurities were removed, the colors became brighter and brighter, like shooting stars dancing in the sky. When there were no more impurities being expelled, the light green flame suddenly stopped spinning. Almost 20 glittering and resplendent liquid beads of different colors were like stars hanging in the night sky, slowly spinning according to the remaining inertia. After it stopped floating in the air, it seemed to be even more beautiful than the brightest gems. It was clear, bright, colorful, and beautiful in an instant. Zhang Peng slowly exhaled. He had been holding his breath since the beginning, not even daring to breathe loudly. Just as he let out a sigh of relief, The nearly 20 colorful liquid crystal beads suddenly collided with each other and killed each other. Such a beautiful thing was destroyed, and Zhang Peng felt a little heartache. The liquid beads continuously collided, fused and separated. The light green flame was like an executioner adding fuel to the fire, constantly stirring them up. By the time the light green flame began to rotate in a regular pattern, there were only 18 of the nearly 20 clusters of liquid crystal beads left in the upper, middle and lower layers. Their shapes were similar to amber, and they were very beautiful. There were 3, 6, and 9 beads respectively. The top 3 beads were golden and as big as fists. The middle 6 beads were the size of chicken eggs, and the bottom 9 beads were the size of chicken eggs. The 3, 6, and 9 beads were arranged in a pyramid formation. Zhang Peng had personally picked out the immortal herbs according to the pill recipe. He could roughly make out what they were. The 3 golden ones were immortal Ascension pills, the 6 brown ones were marrow cleansing pills, and the 9 black ones were restriction breaking pills. Just as he was counting, the 18 beads of liquid beads began to roll up and down like waves. Zhang Peng understood that this was the final baking stage. Normally, when a pill was refined to this stage, it would be a foregone conclusion. Most pills would not be wasted. The color of the light green flame gradually deepened. Yu Qianqiu slightly increased the temperature of the fire, and the 18 beads of liquid beads gradually shrank until they were the size of quail eggs. Then, the roasting flame spun rapidly, and 18 three-colored immortal pills immediately popped out. Zhang Peng stretched out his hands and directly sucked the 18 immortal pills into his palms. Yu Qianqiu clenched his fingers, and the green flame was completely absorbed into his body. A refreshing fragrance began to emit from Zhang Peng's hands. Just taking a few more sniffs would make one feel refreshed. Wow, this is my first time refining. There isn't even a single waste pill. No wonder they said that master's alchemy skills are extraordinary. Zhang Peng looked at the 18 scorching hot immortal pills in his hands and was secretly speechless. He looked up at Yu Qianqiu and said enviously, "Master, I heard that you once held 10 layers in each hand and refined 20 cauldrons of pills at the same time in Ethereal Palace. Is that true?" 20 cauldrons? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He recalled that he had indeed done that in Ethereal Palace. Looking at the immortal pills in Zhang Peng's hands, Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "I did do that when I was in the early stage of tribulation passing. But now," he smiled but did not say anything. He felt that there was nothing to brag about in front of his disciple. Back then, when he refined 20 cauldrons with both hands, his cultivation was only in the early stage of tribulation passing. Now that he was the strongest expert in the world in the late stage of soul formation, the difference between his cultivation and that of the past was like heaven and earth. If he were to use his full strength, he wouldn't dare to say that he could refine 100 cauldrons at the same time. Zhang Peng's heart skipped a beat. He vaguely guessed the hidden meaning behind Yu Qianqiu's words. He immediately begged with a bitter face, "Master, why don't you teach me your alchemy skills?" Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. He remembered that apart from passing the good Yuan sword technique to them, he really did not care about them anymore. He had been busy with other things. But if he wanted to teach them the alchemy skills, he must first teach them the Starflame Fire technique. But this technique could easily cause a big fuss. After a moment of silence, Yu Qianqiu put away the immortal pills in Zhang Peng's hands and said in a low voice, "Alchemy has no benefits when fighting enemies. How about this? 100 kilometers to the east, I'll wait for you there. I'll teach you a great technique." With that said, he disappeared from the house. Zhang Peng's mouth was agape. He didn't expect that his master would teach him a great technique, just because he said it casually. On second thought, he felt a little ashamed. His master was busy with important matters, but he said something like that. He really shouldn't have said that. Thinking about it, he was still extremely excited, and he dashed outside. After dashing out of Utopia's military camp, he immediately flew east. When he arrived 100 kilometers to the east, he realized that there were 2 people waiting for him. When he landed, he realized that his senior brother Hong Qi was also there. At that moment, Hong Qi was already a stalwart man. He had a dignified appearance, and coupled with the fact that he had been in charge of the Hong Gang for many years, he more or less exuded the aura of a leader. However, as Yu Qianqiu was standing at the side, he didn't dare to show any aura. His master was the #1 expert in the world. Therefore, he obediently hid at the side. Hee. Junior brother, you're here. Hong Qi smiled wretchedly. Although he was much older than Zhang Peng, there was nothing he could do about it. He had entered the sect earlier than Zhang Peng. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him. He couldn't stand how smug he was after taking advantage of Zhang Peng, so he immediately kicked his butt. Hong Qi's smirk instantly froze, and he obediently stood at the side with an awkward expression, not daring to even fart. Zhang Peng didn't take the opportunity to kick him while he was down. He still cupped his hands and greeted, "Senior brother." Then, he stood beside Hong Qi and waited for his master's instructions. Yu Qianqiu looked into the distance calmly and said, "Today, Zhang Peng mentioned imparting techniques. After some thought, I also feel that I should impart some things to you." As he said this, his expression became serious. He looked at the two of them and said with a serious expression, "I have the 5 elements grand techniques of water, fire, metal, wood, and earth. Each of these techniques has extraordinary effects. I wish to impart them to the two of you. Are the two of you willing to cultivate them?" Although he himself hadn't mastered the 5 elements grand techniques, he felt that as a master, he should act like a master. Therefore, he put on the airs of a master. However, he felt that it was a little strange to speak like this. 5 elements grand techniques? The two of them looked at each other and immediately revealed expressions of wild joy. They knelt in front of Yu Qianqiu and kowtowed excitedly. "Disciple is willing to cultivate it. I have some ugly words to say first." Yu Qianqiu stared at the two of them coldly and snorted. "This 5 elements grand techniques is not ordinary. It is not allowed to be spread outside. Remember this. In the future, whether you teach disciples or pass it on to your own descendants, this technique can only be passed on to one person. If you dare to violate this, don't blame me for taking your lives. Do you understand?" Disciple understands master's teachings. The two of them kowtowed again. "Get up." After Yu Qianqiu called the two of them up, he didn't say anything else. He pointed his hand forward, and the ground immediately shook violently. The two of them's expressions changed slightly. They saw that not far away from them, a hill that was nearly 100 meters tall had risen. The two of them were immediately stunned. "Who has a flying sword?" Yu Qianqiu asked. The two of them immediately woke up. Although they didn't know what their master was going to do, they both took out a flying sword. The two of them saw their master wave his sleeve, and immediately felt the weight in their hands lighten. In front of their eyes, silver dust floated with the wind, and the flying sword disappeared. Both of them had silently turned into silver dust. The two of them felt as if they were struck by lightning. Their hearts were extremely shocked. The two of them knew that their master's cultivation was high, but they didn't expect it to be so high. With a flick of his finger, a mountain could rise from the ground, and with a wave of his hand, metal could be turned into dust. His methods were so magical that it was indescribable. It was really too frightening, and had already exceeded their imagination. The two of them looked at Yu Qianqiu with cold eyes. They were trembling with fear. They didn't expect their master to be so strong. Chapter 924. These are the metal conjuration art and earth conjuration art of the 5 elements. Both of you can only choose one each. Don't be greedy. Yu Qianqiu's gaze moved between the two of them. He asked indifferently, "Who will choose the metal conjuration art, and who will choose the earth conjuration art?" The two of them looked at each other and hesitated. In the end, Zhang Peng cupped his hands at Hong Qi and said, "Senior apprentice brother, you choose first." Hong Qi chuckled. He wanted to choose first, but in front of his master, how could he not maintain the demeanor of a senior apprentice brother? He immediately cupped his hands and replied, "Junior apprentice brother, you choose first." Senior apprentice brother should choose first. Junior apprentice brother should choose first. The two of them politely pushed the responsibility around, but they couldn't come up with a decision. Yu Qianqiu couldn't stand it anymore. He raised his eyebrows and snorted coldly. There's an order of seniority. Senior apprentice brother before junior apprentice brother. With this as the basis, the two of them naturally couldn't push the responsibility around anymore. Hong Qi smiled sheepishly and asked Zhang Peng for his opinion. Should I choose the metal conjuration art? He often mingled in the human world, and heard that Yu Qianqiu used the metal conjuration art to shock the cultivation world. Of course, he didn't know that it was the metal conjuration art before. Now that he knew, he couldn't help but covet it. Alright, then I'll choose the earth conjuration art. Zhang Peng agreed readily. After confirming their choices, the two of them looked at their master eagerly, waiting for his approval. Yu Qianqiu didn't interfere with their choice anymore. He said to Hong Qi, "Wait here obediently." Without waiting for Hong Qi's reply, he waved his sleeve at Zhang Peng, and the two of them disappeared into thin air, leaving Hong Qi waiting alone. On the yellow plain of the eastern Holy Land, two people suddenly appeared. A gust of wind blew past, swirling the yellow dust around. Zhang Peng looked around, but he didn't know where he was. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at the vast yellow plain. Remember, yellow soil is the best place to cultivate the earth's secret art. Without waiting for Zhang Peng's reply, Zhang Xian pointed his finger downward, and the yellow plains trembled. A crack tore open in the ground, and the master and disciple fell into it. After descending to a depth of nearly 100 meters, Yu Qianqiu pushed his palms to the left and right, and an underground space that was more than 10 meters wide instantly formed. Then, he put his palms together, and the cracks on both sides of the ground trembled again. Zhang Peng looked up at the sky in surprise and joy. The ray of light above him gradually disappeared, leaving the ground pitch black. Yu Qianqiu casually scattered a handful of fluorescent stones, and the spherical underground space suddenly lit up. The master and disciple then sat cross-legged facing each other. After Zhang Peng had calmed down, and his mind was clear, Yu Qianqiu began to explain the cultivation method of the earth formula to Zhang Peng in detail. After Zhang Peng memorized and comprehended it, he immediately sat cross-legged and closed his eyes to enter a state of cultivation. Yu Qianqiu secretly returned to Utopia. In Utopia, Hong Qi, who had been waiting for a long time, was feeling gloomy about how much longer he had to wait. When he suddenly saw his master appear alone, he looked around and asked, "Master, where's junior brother Zhang Peng?" Yu Qianqiu didn't waste his breath on him. He enveloped him with his divine senses, and the two of them moved together. Hong Qi felt the scene before his eyes change, and he discovered that he was in a majestic and huge golden square. A golden altar stood in the middle of the golden square, appearing extremely mysterious. An ancient and vicissitude aura surged toward him from all directions. Hong Qi looked around and saw tall mountain basins surrounding the huge golden square, giving off a huge pressure. The strangest thing was that there were rainbow-colored clouds drifting in the sky above the mountain basins. However, they stayed in the sky above the mountain basins and didn't invade the mountain basins. Hong Qi had a nagging feeling that the rainbow-colored clouds were somewhat familiar. He suddenly thought of something and turned to ask in surprise, "Master, could this place be inside the fog forest?" That rainbow-colored cloud is the soul transformation smoke. Even immortal cultivators from the immortal world will die with a single touch. I've never heard of a way to save them. You'd better behave yourself and not touch them. If anything happens, I won't be able to save you. Yu Qianqiu casually pointed to the altar in the middle of the golden square and said, "That's the legendary immortal Ascension stage. Don't touch the things there. If you cause any trouble, I won't let you off. Do you hear me?" I'll remember," replied Hong Qi as he shrunk his head back. Speaking of the immortal Ascension stage, he had naturally heard of the story of how the various countries had sent nearly 10,000 people to hunt down his master. In the end, his master had killed thousands of them, and in the end, his master had been forced to flee to this place. To think that his master would come to such a forbidden place as he wished. No wonder his master was the #1 expert in the world. Hong Qi looked at Yu Qianqiu with even more admiration. He had been taken away by Yu Qianqiu since he was a child. In his heart, besides being his master, Yu Qianqiu had more or less treated him like a father. Therefore, he would often show off in front of Yu Qianqiu and enjoy the pleasure of being beaten or kicked. It wasn't that he was a pervert, but he subconsciously hoped to find the kind of fatherly love that was missing. Now that his master was in charge of the demon domain, and had the prestige of being the #1 expert in the world, he felt even more honored and proud to have such a master. Remember, the reason why I brought you here is because the environment here is indispensable for cultivating the gold incantation. Once you've mastered it, you'll naturally understand the mysteries here. Sit down cross-legged and listen to your master's teachings, shouted Yu Qianqiu. Hong Qi immediately sat down excitedly, and quickly calmed his mind, and entered a state of concentration. Yu Qianqiu then explained the cultivation mysteries of the gold incantation in detail. After familiarizing himself with it, Hong Qi quickly entered a state of cultivation. After the teachings, Yu Qianqiu would occasionally return to the World Chamber of Commerce to take a look. The rest of his time was spent shuttling back and forth between the yellow soil plain and the Golden Plaza, checking on the two's cultivation progress. Speaking of which, the two of them were lucky. Back then, Yu Qianqiu had put in a lot of effort in order to figure out these two sets of incantations. It was only by chance that he had the opportunity to successfully comprehend them. On the other hand, Zhang Peng and Hong Qi picked up a ready-made advantage without any danger. This was the benefit of being a disciple. A few days later, Zhang Peng was the first to successfully cultivate the earth incantation. He broke through the ground of the yellow soil plain, and excitedly flew to Yu Qianqiu in the air to bow. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand, and pressed it on Zhang Peng's shoulder. He injected his divine sense into Zhang Peng's dantian to check, and found that Zhang Peng's cultivation had indeed directly soared from the tribulation stage to the soul formation stage. However, he immediately frowned. According to the signs of success in cultivating the earth incantation, a yellow crystal bead should have formed in his dantian. However, there was no bead in Zhang Peng's dantian. What was going on? Seeing his master frown, Zhang Peng hesitantly asked, "Master, is there a problem?" Yu Qianqiu shook his head, indicating that there was no problem. He had been supervising their cultivation, so there shouldn't be any mistakes in the process. He wanted to see the results after Hong Qi mastered it. After bringing Zhang Peng back to the Utopia military camp, Yu Qianqiu went to the Golden Square again. He saw that Hong Qi was looking at the hanging golden horn on the golden altar, and pondering about something. Yu Qianqiu then let out a cold snort. Hong Qi heard the sound, and looked over. When he saw that it was him, he immediately rushed over dejectedly and bowed. "Master!" Yu Qianqiu placed his hand on him, and injected his divine sense to check. He discovered that Hong Qi, who had also advanced to the soul formation stage, did not have a crystal bead in his dantian. He heaved a sigh of relief. He believed that it should be, because he had cultivated a technique alone. Then he brought Hong Qi back to the Utopia military camp. When the two of them met in the meeting room, they realized that each other's cultivation levels had increased tremendously. They could not help but click their tongues, lamenting how powerful the technique that their master had imparted to them was. Yu Qianqiu looked at the two of them, who were in high spirits, and could not contain their joy. He said calmly, "I've already imparted the metal art and earth art to the two of you. You'll have to figure out how to use them to fight the enemy. My master, who is your grandmaster, once told me that those who are good at using them are invincible. This sentence has always been my classic, and I'll tell you the same thing now. I hope that you can use the metal art and earth art well, and unleash their greatest power." At the mention of his grandmaster, Zhang Peng only showed respect on his face, and did not feel much. However, Hong Qi had been out there for so many years, so he knew how terrifying his grandmaster, Bai Changchun, was. He was a legend in the cultivation world. "We'll follow master's teachings." The two of them bowed respectfully. Yu Qianqiu had many things to do at the moment, so he did not have the time to chat with the two of them. He took out a pill with a black halo, and placed it on the table. A rich fragrance quickly filled the room. Zhang Peng, find a reliable subordinate at the early stage of the tribulation transcendence to test the pill. Great limit break pill? Zhang Peng's eyes lit up. He had seen the pill recipe before, so he naturally knew that the great limit break pill was an immortal pill, that could increase one's cultivation level. It seemed that his master was prepared to use this. He immediately cupped his fists and said, "Yes," before quickly leaving. Great limit break pill? Hong Chi's eyes stared at the pill on the table. He had used the limit break pill before. So when he heard about the great limit break pill, he could not help but mutter to himself. He did not know what his master was up to. Not long after, Zhang Peng returned with a burly subordinate. When the person saw that Yu Qianqiu was actually here, he was slightly surprised and bowed. "Leader." Yu Qianqiu nodded, then pointed at the pill on the table and smiled. "This is a new great limit break pill that I refined. Its effect is equivalent to the limit break pill. I want to see how much it can increase your cultivation level." With that said, he placed a storage bag on the table, knocked on the table and said, "Let's start on the table. There are enough spirit stones in the bag for you to use." Hearing this, Hong Chi's eyes lit up. It was indeed a treasure that could increase one's cultivation level. "Yes." The person cupped his fists excitedly, then gently floated to the table and sat down cross-legged. He casually picked up a pill beside him, put it in his mouth, then closed his eyes and began to circulate the pill. Yu Qianqiu and the other two stared at him without blinking. Not long after, the person's body trembled, and his cheeks began to flush red. Then his entire face turned red. Even his hands, which were placed on his knees, became bright red. Steam began to rise from his head. That person's eyes suddenly opened, only to see that his eyeballs had also turned blood red. He quickly took out 2 large handfuls of spirit stones from the storage bag on the table, and found that they were both shining purple top-grade spirit stones. His body couldn't help but tremble. "Don't think too much, focus on your task." With a shout from Yu Qianqiu, the person immediately closed his eyes and began to frantically absorb the majestic spirit qi from the spirit stones in his hands. After a long time, not long after the redness on his body disappeared, the person's body shook. He looked at the 3 people who were staring at him with surprise and said, "I broke through to the middle stage of the tribulation passing stage. Let's see how many spirit stones you used." Yu Qianqiu said. He had to know the number of spirit stones used for each level of cultivation, because many people would soon take the restriction-breaking pill. He had to act according to his ability. Zhang Peng immediately went to count. The person had grabbed 2 handfuls of nearly 30 spirit stones, and 8 of them had exhausted their spirit qi. Zhang Peng reported, "I used a little more than 8 spirit stones, which is equivalent to 80,000 upper spirit stones. Take another pill and continue." Yu Qianqiu nodded at the person with a smile. That person immediately did as he was told and swallowed another great restriction-breaking pill. After that, the side effect of taking the pill was exactly the same as before. His whole body was like a cooked red prawn. Just as he grabbed 2 more spirit stones, his chest suddenly heaved up and down, and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. What shocked them was that the blood he spat out was a little black, which was obviously not normal. The person was more or less frightened. Yu Qianqiu shouted again, "Don't worry. This is the poison that was expelled from your body. Continue." The person had to slowly close his eyes and continue to absorb spirit qi to increase his cultivation. Even if Yu Qianqiu didn't tell him, he still had to do it. At this moment, his body was like a big furnace, and he urgently needed to use spirit qi to cool it down. Otherwise, he would die from the heat. After a long time, when the color of his body returned to normal, his body shook again, and he suddenly opened his eyes. He couldn't help but stutter with joy. I broke through to the late stage of tribulation passing." This time, there was no need for Yu Qianqiu to say anything. His eyes were already staring at the pill on the table, and his chest was rising and falling a little quickly. One should know that if he could go one step further, his cultivation would enter the ranks of the legendary spirit-severing experts. This temptation was a little big, but he didn't dare to be greedy. He looked at the leader with a questioning gaze. Zhang Peng took the initiative to count the spirit stones, and after counting he reported, 24 pieces of top-grade spirit stones were used, equivalent to 240,000 high-grade spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu nodded, walking to the table, and took out another interspatial pouch, placing it in front of the person with a smile. Spirit severing and tribulation passing are two completely different concepts. I'm sure the amount of spirit stones used is not small. He took out a handful of shiny black spirit stones and waved it in front of the person, continuing, "Use divine grade spirit stones to continue." The group exchanged a look. This was the first time for Zhang Peng and Hong Qi to see divine grade spirit stones, so they couldn't help feeling shocked. Yes, the person complied and swallowed the great restriction breaking pellet once more. The side effects that came with it caused him to spit out 2 mouthfuls of blood, and this time, the blood he spat out was much darker than before. However, the person didn't mind it. He believed that it was the poison that was expelled from his body. He grabbed 2 handfuls of divine grade spirit stones and absorbed the spiritual energy in his body, rushing towards the spirit severing realm. In fact, Yu Qianqiu knew that the black blood he spat out wasn't the poison that was expelled from his body, but a sign that the poison had worsened after taking the great restriction breaking pellet. If the poison in his body accumulated to a certain extent, and he didn't take the marrow cleansing pellet in time, it wouldn't take long for him to die. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu had already prepared the marrow cleansing pellet, but he wouldn't say anything now, lest it affect the effect of the pill test. Zhang Peng had come into contact with the contents of the pill, so he knew the inside story. However, he was born as a warlord, and when he commanded thousands of soldiers on the battlefield, he paid the smallest price in exchange for the greatest victory. Even if he failed the elixir trial, for the sake of the overall interests of Utopia's army, 1 or 2 deaths were nothing. Of course, this didn't mean that he didn't love his subordinates, but from his point of view, the sacrifice of 1 or 2 people in exchange for the success of all his subordinates was the greatest love. After a long period of time, the person suddenly sat there with his eyes closed, and his body was trembling non-stop. Instantly, the master and disciples, including Yu Qianqiu, were shocked, thinking that something had gone wrong. Yu Qianqiu was about to take a look, but who knew that the person would open his eyes and look at him excitedly. "Leader, I broke through to the early spirit severing realm." Yu Qianqiu was stunned, thinking that something had gone wrong with the person. He raised his hand speechlessly at Zhang Peng. Zhang Peng immediately counted the spirit stones in the person's hand, removing the one that had exhausted all of its spiritual energy, and said, "1 divine grade spirit stone was used, worth 100 million high-grade spirit stones. Continue." Following Yu Qianqiu's order, the person took another great restriction breaking pellet. That person took another restriction breaking pill and spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood. Each mouthful was as black as ink. The great restriction breaking pellet's effect was indeed very good, using only 3 divine grade spirit stones to raise the person's cultivation to the mid-stage spirit severing realm. This was the result of using medicinal pellets to convert spiritual energy, as well as a large amount of spirit stones. However, what worried Yu Qianqiu the most was that although the person sitting on the table was excited, he could see that the bones under his skin were dark green. Clearly, the poison was not light. Yu Qianqiu was afraid that this person wouldn't be able to take it if he continued. After all, this person was his subordinate. Hong Qi wasn't a fool either. Noticing the abnormality under the person's skin, it was obvious that this person was poisoned. Looking at the remaining great restriction breaking pellets on the table, he sucked in a breath of cold air. Zhang Peng clearly saw through his master's worry. Gritting his teeth, he glared at the excited person and ordered, "Continue to break through to the late-stage spirit severing realm." Yes, unaware of his own condition, the person swallowed another great restriction breaking pellet. What happened next was 4 mouthfuls of black blood that carried a faint stench. Fortunately, that person actually used 9 divine grade spirit stones to really break through to the late-stage spirit severing realm. However, the skin on his body was already dark purple, and there were even slight swelling. This was a sign that he was on the verge of dying. However, his gaze shifted back to the great restriction breaking pellets on the table, and the greed in his nature was exposed. Breaking through to the late-stage spirit severing realm, his heart yearned for a higher realm. Yu Qianqiu swept his sleeve, collecting all the remaining great restriction-breaking pellets on the table. He then took out a marrow-colored marrow-cleansing pellet and passed it to the person, shouting, "Quickly swallow it. Dissolve the accumulated poison in your body." The person was stunned for a moment after receiving the marrow-cleansing pellet. Looking at his palm that was so dark that it was turning purple and swollen, he was dumbfounded. Yu Qianqiu's voice sounded again. "Quickly swallow it if you don't want to die." Chapter 925. Under the severe blow, that person hurriedly swallowed the marrow-cleansing pill in fear, and quickly circulated the medicinal power. After a while, strands of black greasy substance continuously oozed out of his pores and accumulated on his body, finally wrapping his whole body with a disgusting sticky substance that was as black as pitch. The room instantly became stinky, but the three of them were not blown away by the stench. They held their breath and kept observing the changes in the man's body. After half a day, the man had been wrapped by the sticky substance that was discharged from his body, leaving only 2 nostrils and holes. His whole body was covered with a layer of black scabs. What worried the three of them the most was that the man's breathing had become very weak. Fortunately, the frequency of his heart, which was so chaotic that it was about to stop at any time, had gradually stabilized, which meant that he had passed the critical period. However, the three of them did not relax. No one could be sure what would happen until the end. When his weak breathing gradually became stronger, he moved slightly, and his body made a cracking sound. The black scabs that covered his whole body began to crack and peel off piece by piece. A face was the first to be revealed. He looked at Yu Qianqiu weakly and said in a weak voice, "Leader." Obviously, although the limit-breaking pill was extraordinary, using such a method to improve one's cultivation was too harmful to the body, not to mention taking 5 limit-breaking pills in a row. Yu Qianqiu's expression was a little dignified. No wonder few people in the big sects in the celestial realm used this kind of thing. The foundation of the body had been damaged, and their future achievements in cultivation were destined to be limited. When he first met Shui Mingqing, he heard him say that almost no one could improve their cultivation above the great celestial realm unless there was another remedial elixir. As for the remedial elixir, it was said that the sect master of Chaotian Palace had a kind of elixir called Mend Heaven Pill. However, it was said that the elixir needed to refine it was extremely difficult. Since the establishment of Chaotian Palace, only the sect master had refined it once. There was also a rumor that the sect master of Chaotian Palace was originally a nobody. Later, because of revenge, he took an elixir similar to the limit-breaking pill to forcibly improve his cultivation. In the end, after he got his revenge, his cultivation stagnated. However, those who could become the founder of a sect were all people with great perseverance. In order to repair the consequences of forcibly increasing his cultivation, he resolutely studied the art of alchemy, hoping that one day he would be able to remove the shackles on his body. Hard work pays off. He actually managed to research and refine the heaven-mending pill, breaking the shackles on his body in one go. At the same time, he had accumulated a wealth of experience in alchemy because he had concocted the heaven-mending pill. Thus, due to fate, he actually took a different path and walked a path that belonged to him. He established a sect with alchemy and founded the Skyward Palace of today. This is an immortal pill. Consume it, and not only will it recover your strength, it will also help you raise your cultivation to the immortal realm. Yu Qianqiu took out the golden immortal Ascension pill and added solemnly, "The cultivation base of the immortal realm is divided into minor immortal, upper immortal, great immortal, and immortal emperor. Take this immortal Ascension pill, and it will help you break through to the early stage of minor immortal." An immortal pill. Hong Qi, who was at the side, was dumbfounded. He stared at the pill in his master's hand and could not help but sigh in his heart. His master was becoming more and more unfathomable. He actually had such a thing in his hands. Actually, when it came to immortal pills, only people like Yu Qianqiu who knew alchemy and had lived in the immortal realm knew that the so-called immortal pills in the immortal realm and the so-called spirit pills in the cultivation realm were the same thing. The only difference was the medicinal properties and the effects. Some of the immortal pills in the immortal realm were even worse than the spirit pills in the mortal realm. The so-called immortal herbs and spirit herbs were also the same thing. Many of them were common in both the immortal realm and the mortal realm. However, in the immortal realm, they were called immortal herbs, and in the mortal realm, they were called spirit herbs. For example, the Adumbra flower, that Yu Qianqiu regarded as a treasure, was not only a top-notch immortal herb in the mortal realm, but also one of the top-notch immortal herbs in the immortal realm. When Yu Qianqiu had bought the treasure guide from Wan Ling, he had seen that the Adumbra flower, one of the 9 top-notch immortal herbs in the immortal realm, was actually among them. Advanced to the immortal realm, the man with the weak body cried out involuntarily. His trembling hand reached for the immortal pill in Yu Qianqiu's hand and put it into his mouth without hesitation. He ignored his body's weakness and impatiently circulated the medicinal power. Not long after, the 3 of them saw the man's weak and pale face turn red. His sunken eyes and cheekbones, which had been tossed around due to taking 5 great restriction-breaking pills, gradually became plump. A majestic aura slowly seeped out of his body and circulated around his body. It forced all the black scabs on his body to fall off, and in the blink of an eye, he was completely naked. On the surface, there didn't seem to be much movement, but the 3 of them could feel that his dantian was undergoing an earth-shattering change. The 3 of them wanted to use their divine senses to invade his dantian to investigate, but they were all forced out by the violent aura that was like a tornado. This time, the process of circulating the immortal Ascension pills was a little long. He sat on the table for a full 3 days without moving at all. During this period, Yu Qianqiu would occasionally return to the World Chamber of Commerce to see if there was anything going on. In the end, the World Chamber of Commerce was deserted, and almost no one came to visit. After asking around, it turned out that all the sects in the immortal realm were actively preparing to participate in the ranking conference. This concerned the honor of each sect, so it naturally attracted everyone's attention. Now, who would care about the trivial matters of the World Chamber of Commerce? Even Heartless Palace probably didn't have the leisure to care about him for now. In this way, Yu Qianqiu felt at ease. You guys worry about yourselves, and I can also do my own thing without worry. If there are any debts, we can settle them in the future. Let's not disturb each other for now. 3 days later, that disciple suddenly let out a painful groan, which immediately attracted the attention of the 3 master and disciples. They saw that the majestic aura that lingered outside his body had been completely absorbed into his body. His entire body swelled up like a ball, and cracks appeared on the surface of his body. Drops of blood seeped out, and it was obvious that his body had burst open. The 3 master and disciples looked at each other, not knowing why this was happening. This situation continued for close to half a day. That disciple's entire body was already dripping with blood. Fortunately, his body that was swollen like a ball was gradually drying up. Not long after, his entire body returned to normal. However, the dried bloodstains on his body looked a little horrifying. Oh, that disciple suddenly let out a long groan from his throat. It was the kind of groan that was comfortable to the bones, and it was the kind of groan that came after suffering. Then the bones all over his body made explosive crackling sounds. His hands, which were clenched tightly around his abdomen, suddenly opened his arms, and a burst of golden mist burst out from his body. Immediately, the bloodstains on the surface of his body turned into dust and drifted away. After the golden mist circled around his body, he opened his mouth and sucked it all in. Zhang Peng and Hong Qi looked at each other. For some reason, Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. This was because he knew that after one's cultivation reached the immortal realm, the true essence in one's body would turn from white to gold after turning into immortal essence. This should be a success. Sure enough, that disciple's eyes suddenly opened, and a burst of light shot out. His entire body was full of vigor and spirit, and the joy on his face was indescribable. His gaze swept past Hong Qi and Zhang Peng, and found that the two were only at the early soul formation stage. His gaze landed on Yu Qianqiu, and he found that he still couldn't see through his leader's cultivation. He immediately landed lightly on the ground and excitedly bowed. "Thank you for your help, leader. My cultivation has already broken through to the legendary immortal realm." "Hehe. Put on your clothes first." Yu Qianqiu pointed at his exposed body. The disciple looked down and immediately found his storage bag awkwardly. He took out some clothes from inside and put them on. After he put on his clothes, Yu Qianqiu placed his hand on his body and found that he had indeed advanced to the early small immortal realm. He immediately looked at him with a serious expression and said, "Although your cultivation has reached the immortal realm, your body has yet to be forged into an immortal body. If you act rashly, your body may not be able to withstand your current cultivation, and you may explode and die. But don't worry, I will find a way to help you forge an immortal body within 3 months. At that time, you will be a true immortal realm expert." "Thank you for your help, leader." The disciple gratefully bowed deeply. Yu Qianqiu gave Zhang Peng a look. Zhang Peng understood and immediately led the disciple out. He couldn't help but tell the disciple to keep today's secret. "Master," Hong Qi said worriedly, "this person's cultivation suddenly advanced to the immortal realm. Will he cause any trouble?" "Humph." Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. "He's just an early small immortal. He won't be able to cause any waves. I've even killed upper immortals before." Hong Qi was speechless when he heard that. He didn't know what level his master's cultivation had reached. When Zhang Peng returned, Yu Qianqiu took out an immortal ascension pill that was surrounded by a golden halo and looked at it. He held it lightly in his hand and asked, "How many spirit stones did he use to advance from early tribulation passing to early small immortal?" Zhang Peng thought for a moment and said, "Nearly 33 top-grade spirit stones and 13 divine-grade spirit stones. When converted to high-grade spirit stones, it's about 1,303,330,000. In other words, even if a person advanced from early foundation establishment to early small immortal, it wouldn't take more than 14 divine-grade spirit stones. There are close to 10,000 people in Utopia, so that's only 140,000 divine-grade spirit stones. More than 300 feudal lords." Yu Qianqiu muttered to himself, then asked, "Hong Qi, you've been in the cultivation world for so long, and your forces are not small. How many cultivators are there in the cultivation world now?" "Ah." Hong Qi paused and pondered. The disciples of the lords of the various countries, the disciples of the various sects in China's cultivation world, and the individual cultivators scattered all over the cultivation world, as well as our own people, I'm afraid there are close to 1 million cultivators. 1 million cultivators, 14 divine-grade spirit stones for each person. That's only about 10 million. Not a lot, not a lot, not a lot at all. However, I can't care about them right now." Yu Qianqiu calculated for a moment, then chuckled sinisterly. No one knew what he was thinking. He looked at the immortal ascension pill in his hand, then took out 3 jade archives and passed them to Zhang Peng, saying, "These are the pill formulas for the Great Restriction Breaking Pill, Marrow Cleansing Pill, and Immortal Ascension Pill. Give him the Great Restriction Breaking Pill's pill formula first, and ask him to refine 100,000 Great Restriction Breaking Pills. Once he's done, give him the Marrow Cleansing Pill's pill formula, 20,000 pills. Finally, give him the Immortal Ascension Pill's pill formula, 20,000 pills." This, Zhang Peng was a little troubled. "Master, you should look for Chief Qin yourself. I don't have the right to order him around. I have my reasons for asking you to do that. I want them to understand my attitude, and I hope that we won't be too distant from each other." Yu Qianqiu sneered. "Go ahead and pass on the message. Whether they carry it out or not is up to them. If all these pills are refined, the first thing you need to do is to raise your army's cultivation. You've seen the process of refining the pills. There's no need for me to teach you. There are 100 million divine-grade spirit stones inside, enough for everyone." Huang Xiaolong threw a storage pouch to Zhang Peng. Chapter 926. Yes, Zhang Peng accepted the order and put away the things. Hong Qi, who was at the side, looked at the Immortal Ascension pill in his master's hand with envy. He smiled apologetically and said, Master, don't let the goodies flow to outsiders. When will we be able to raise our cultivation again? Yu Qianqiu glanced at him. He also wanted everyone's cultivation to reach the heavens in a single step, but it was easy to forcibly increase cultivation. But it was troublesome to forge an immortal body. It was fine if there were only a few people, but if there were too many, it would be troublesome. It would definitely attract the attention of the Immortal Palace. Moreover, the Immortal Palace controlled the 72 worlds' immortal ascension passages. It would be difficult to avoid them. What's the hurry? Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. There is something you need to pay attention to when you get out. Use the connections of Hong Gang and Qing Gang to find out who can make pills in the entire cultivation world. And those cultivators scattered around the cultivation world, as long as they can make pills, record their whereabouts. When I need them, you must make sure that you can find them at any time. Ah, Hong Qi was stunned. He scratched his face in confusion. Master, do you want them to help you make pills? Just do as I say. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and sent him back to Hong Gang. He then opened his palm and looked at the immortal ascension pill in his hand. He muttered to himself, there are many big sects in the immortal world. Each of them is strong and well-trained. Although I am not as good as them, I have more people. I have millions of cultivators in the human world. Which sect in the immortal world dares to say that they have more people than me? Who says that they can't compete with you? Now that all the spirit-severing cultivators in the cultivation world were under his command, the entire human world was his territory. There was no other reason why he asked Hong Qi to count the number of people who could make pills in the cultivation world. Because although the number of people in the cultivation world was huge, to bring them to the immortal world to join in the fun, their cultivation was too low. Therefore, he needed a lot of limit-breaking pills and marrow-cleansing pills. But how many people would they need for 1,000,000? Just one tribulation-passing stage cultivator required 5 restriction-breaking pills, 1 marrow-cleansing pill, and 1 immortal ascension pill. In the cultivation world, there were countless foundation establishment and nascent soul cultivators. He needed at least 8 million restriction-breaking pills, and at least 1 million marrow-cleansing pills and immortal ascension pills. With such a large number of pills, if Chun Feng and the others were to refine them, it would probably take several years even if they worked day and night. Therefore, he needed all the alchemy cultivators in the entire cultivation world to work for him. With his current power in the cultivation world, this was not a problem at all. The only thing that worried him the most was how he should find a way to help these people smoothly obtain their immortal physiques. Zhang Peng, tell your master's wife to stop doing other things and plant the immortal herbs used to refine these 3 immortal pills. The planting ratio of Great Restriction Breaking Pill, Marrow Cleansing Pill, and Immortal Ascension Pill is 8-to-1. Yu Qianqiu said lightly. Plant them without limit? Zhang Peng was shocked. He did not know why his master wanted such a large number. After a pause, he still accepted the order and said, yes. When he raised his head again, his master was no longer in front of him. In a remote area of Utopia, on a large snowy mountain where few people went, Yu Qianqiu looked at the purple chaos not far away. It was vast and mighty, connecting the heavens and the earth. As his cultivation level increased, the territory of Utopia also became wider. Mountains and rivers appeared one after another, and he did not expect that even the snowy mountain would appear. As long as my cultivation level can continue to increase, it seems that this place will become an independent world sooner or later. I just don't know how big it will be in the end. Yu Qianqiu looked at the purple chaos in the distance and muttered to himself. He opened his palm, and the fragrant immortal ascension pill was swallowed by him without hesitation. Then, he sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes to circulate the medicinal power. Under the corrosion of the immortal ascension pill in his stomach, some golden liquid gradually appeared on its surface. Traces of energy started to seep out and spread to his limbs and bones. As the liquid increased, the energy started to be released in waves, and it became more and more intense as it surged into his meridians. At first, this energy could still flow smoothly under the control of Yu Qianqiu's quintessential essence. However, as the speed at which the immortal Ascension pill melted increased, the released energy started to flood his meridians like raging waves. It was violent and violent, causing Yu Qianqiu's heart to palpitate. The golden fog-like energy increased until it filled all the meridians in his limbs and bones. It even surged directly into his dantian. Increase, increase, increase. As the energy overloaded his body, Yu Qianqiu felt swollen. His entire body was swollen and painful, and his skin felt like it was about to split open. At that moment, he was no longer in the mood to control the energy in his body. He raised his cultivation level to the limit and tried his best to protect his swollen body. Damn it! It was too painful. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have played with it. If this went on, he would definitely explode. Yu Qianqiu was immersed in endless pain and suffering. This feeling was too uncomfortable. Once it started, there was no way to get rid of it. He couldn't avoid it even if he wanted to. He felt like his body was about to explode, and he really couldn't hold on any longer. He didn't know that his current appearance was the same as the subordinate he had seen before. His entire body was covered with cracks, and blood had already dyed his entire body. His entire body was swollen like a ball, and he didn't look like a human anymore. Just as he was about to give up, the 10 small people in his dantian, who were sitting cross-legged with their eyes closed, were finally forced open by the pressure of the golden fog and entered his body. The 10 small people trembled and opened their eyes at the same time. Their clear eyes looked at each other, and they seemed to know that their original bodies were in danger. So, they opened their mouths and noses and breathed in the quintessential essence mixed with the golden fog. They began to speed up the refinement process. The golden fog was like a medicine that could assimilate the quintessential essence. The 10 small people breathed in the golden white fog, but what they breathed out was a wisp of golden light. They breathed in big mouthfuls, but what they breathed out was only a thin wisp. As the 10 small people worked hard to refine the golden fog, Yu Qianqiu, who felt like he couldn't hold on any longer, finally persevered. Moreover, as time passed, he felt that his skin, which was about to burst open, was showing signs of shrinking. In fact, he was like a balloon that had been inflated and was gradually shrinking, but the speed was a little slow. After an unknown amount of time, when Yu Qianqiu finally heaved a sigh of relief and began to examine his body with his divine sense, he immediately discovered the actions of the 10 small people in his body. The wisps of golden light that they breathed out seemed to have a mind of their own. As soon as they were spat out, they swam out of his dantian like living fish and began to wander around his meridians, as if they were observing this new world. Immortal essence. Yu Qianqiu's body shook. With a glance, he could guess that the golden wisps were immortal essence. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. There was finally hope for his cultivation to reach the immortal realm. Subconsciously, he wanted to control them, but they were too small and not very obedient. They were as slippery as loaches, very hard to control. The 10 small people continuously breathed in and out, and as time passed, the number of golden wisps increased, scurrying around his meridians. Once they met, they would happily fuse together. When they formed a small golden cloud, they could no longer escape Yu Qianqiu's control. Yu Qianqiu controlled the golden cloud to sweep through all the meridians in his body, taking in stray strands and merging them into a large golden cloud. After that, he began to clear and expel the remaining true essence and golden mist from his body into his dantian, for the 10 small people to absorb and refine. When the last golden and white mist was absorbed, refined and spat out, the 10 small people seemed to have gained a great understanding. Each of them solemnly closed their eyes, and the circle formed by the 10 people began to spin faster and faster. In the end, it was so fast that even Yu Qianqiu himself couldn't see it clearly. A huge suction force began to emerge from his dantian, sucking all the golden immortal essence in Yu Qianqiu's body into his dantian, stirring up a golden hurricane in his dantian. Even if Yu Qianqiu wanted to use his divine sense to explore it, it would be difficult. Suddenly, a huge momentum exploded in his dantian like a nuclear weapon. Yu Qianqiu's body shook, and from the inside out, A golden mist suddenly burst out of his body, washing away all the blood scabs on his body. How could Yu Qianqiu allow the celestial core power that he had painstakingly refined to dissipate? He immediately extended his divine sense outwards and opened his mouth and nose. Like a whale drawing water, he sucked in the golden mist that lingered around his body. The golden cloud, which was originally intertwined with steel wires, was blown to pieces. After it was reorganized, it flowed back into Yu Qianqiu's body. His body, which was covered with bruises and bruises, was like a good rain after a long drought. It felt cool and refreshing to his limbs and bones. Oh! Yu Qianqiu let out an incomparably comfortable moan. He found that the effects of the explosion were quite good. The immortal elemental energy didn't have its own consciousness like before. At this moment, his consciousness was the immortal elemental energy's consciousness. It was completely under his control. When he controlled the immortal essence to nourish his meridians and circulate it to his dantian, Yu Qianqiu realized that the 10 little people in his dantian had become 9. After the explosion, the 7 souls had merged with his life soul. The 7 souls had begun to return to his life soul, which meant that his cultivation had entered another level, reaching the early stage of minor immortal. Yu Qianqiu's eyes widened, and he suddenly stood up with his arms facing the sky. He laughed out loud excitedly. However, before he could laugh for a while, his laughter stopped abruptly. He saw that the purple chaos not far from the Great Snow Mountain had disappeared without a trace. Looking from the Great Snow Mountain, the foot of the mountain where the snow had melted was connected to a large area of wilderness. As he looked further, he saw a beach. At the edge of the beach, white waves surged, crashing against the shore, and a vast ocean surged. The ocean actually appeared. Yu Qianqiu did not expect to see such a scene the moment he opened his eyes. He immediately let out a long howl toward the sky in excitement, echoing the surging ocean in the distance. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.